Damoui. I am the professor and director of economics program. I have the pleasure of directing the Center for Economics of Social Issues. I'm also saying hello to all those who are watching us on live stream. We have translation. Those who need yes, that service, please go ahead, and there are headphones for everyone who need it. The music is going to be turned off. Okay. All right. Thank you, Vinny.
Yes.
So, okay. So, without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Leon Nelson, our provost, to the podium.
Thank you, Jamshid. It's great to see all of you. Good morning. And I welcome you to our Cal Lutheran campus. It's always a pleasure to welcome guests to events on our campus, but this is a special opportunity for me today to welcome you as we focus on the economic impact of undocumented immigrants in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. This is special because upholding social justice in our community is at the root of who we are as a Lutheran institution. We care deeply about social justice. In fact, it's embedded in our mission statement. Our mission statement says that we educate leaders for a global society who are strong in character and judgment, confident in their identity and vocation, and committed to service and justice. The Evangelical Lutheran Church in America has a long history of helping immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers settle in the United States, and also supporting fair and generous immigration policies. Since 1939, the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service has welcomed more than 379,000 refugees to the United States. There's a social statement on immigration that was developed by the Lutheran Church, and I want to read a brief section to you. It says, "We recognize the obstacles and difficulties that our society faces in welcoming newcomers. Too often we are slow in, we tire of, or even resist fostering a hospitable environment for newcomers. Too often we perpetuate the racism, the fear of, and the animosity toward newcomers that show themselves in our society. Our country's history exhibits an ugly strain of exclusionary attitudes and policies towards newcomers who differ from the majority. This leads to laws that unduly restrict immigration and threaten the well-being of newcomers. The presence of our newcomers in our society heightens our awareness of these realities and of the experience of new immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers in the United States. This awareness makes us more appreciative of the gifts that our new neighbors bring and of the barriers as well as the opportunities they encounter." Here at Cal Lutheran, we are committed to defend human dignity, to stand with poor and powerless people, to advocate for justice, and to work for peace. I welcome you here today to this conference on the state of undocumented immigrants, and I thank you for your commitment to social justice. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Gerhard Apfelthaler, the Dean of the School of Management.
So I think we forgot to advance the slide here. Forgive us for that. That was Leon Nielsen. That's me. The Observer, Dark Brandon, Enough is Enough, Hog Rider, Grumpy, Bossman, Star Dog. These were some of the screen names of a few noble individuals who expressed their opinions on an article that my dear colleague Dr. Jamshid Damoui and I had published on the topic of undocumented workers. The article, originally appearing in the Ventura County Star, was picked up by Yahoo News, and within 24 hours, more than 600 people had commented on it. You want to hear a few more of the screen names? Antagonist, Eye in the Sky, Wake Up, Wicked Truth, No More Bull, forgive my language, and Satan. I had to say that this one made me a little nervous. Up to here was okay, but Satan, that did me in. So what did these fine people say about our article? Baloney, fake news, total garbage, trash piece, nothing but lies, bold-faced lies. Keep your hands off my wallet. Propaganda, liberal brainwashing, delusional dope-smoking Democrats. 2 of the dumbest PhDs on the planet. And one person suggested that we publish our home addresses so that someone can send us busloads of undocumented residents. Somebody said 2 fine professors from California whose names I can't even pronounce. That tells it all. And someone should check into their immigration status. So by a big stretch of imagination, we were able to find 1 or 2 comments on our article that were somewhere between neutral and positive to what we had to say and what you're going to hear today. And all of this is exactly why today's event is so important to me. As a university, as a school of management, we're trying to do our part to elevate the discussion from the tragic depths of misguided politics to a factual conversation about demographics, economics, and humanity. I'm extraordinarily proud to be able to serve as the dean to someone like Dr. Jamshid Amoui, who is an economist with a brilliant mind and a very, very big heart. He has dedicated his academic life to researching the unintended consequences of economic activity at our Center for Economics of Social Issues and to educating young minds in ways that are deeply rooted in our university's mission and values. Prior to serving in his current role, Dr. Amoui was a senior economist for the United Nations Development Program, and back in the early 1980s, he was Director General of the Department of Economic Studies and Policies at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Finance of Iran. In 2006, he received the President's Teaching Award at California Lutheran University, and in 2018, the Provost's Distinguished Scholar Award. It's my honor and my pleasure to welcome you all here today and to introduce my colleague, Dr. Amoui.
Thank you so much, Gerhard, and thank you all. We have a program lined up, and we'll go through different issues in a way that can bring the facts to your purview. So let us start with the first one. I'm going to invite my esteemed colleague, Dr. Khan, and Stephanie Amogo to come to the podium and present a tale of their journey to Tijuana, which happened about maybe a month ago, a little longer than that. So, Sabit.
Very good morning to all of you, and thank you, Dr. Amoui. So here we have a short presentation of a project that we put together. I teach a class called Nonprofit Management in the MPPA program. I see some of my students here who've taken that class. And as part of that class, I've always tried to experiment, try to offer some experiential learning exercises for our students and to take them on field visits. Either field visits, or typically we do a strategic planning exercise where small groups of students actually work on a real strategic plan or part of a strategic plan for either an organization or a project. And this time around, I said, why don't we switch up things a little bit and go south of the border? It's a little risky, it's a little out of the box, but I said, let's try it. And thanks to the help of Dr. Cristina Sanchez and her office, they gave their blessing. They said, okay, it's something to try. So I identified over a period of time several migrant shelters that I personally knew and actually visited, and also a very interesting connection at the Colegio Frontera Norte, which is one of the leading research institutions and universities that focuses on migration. So I opened it up to all my students in that class, and 3 brave souls took up that offer, one of whom is Stephanie. She's here with us. We have a short video that we can sort of captures that experience, as well as Stephanie will speak briefly on the journey itself. Headed to Mexico with 3 of our NPPS students. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So I'm an internal volunteer, so we stay on the 4th floor. And then some people come for, I think it's between 3 months and a year. So I'm here for 3 months, there are people that are here for a year. And then we also have our external volunteers that come once a week to help. So we have a lady that's from San Diego, she comes once a week.
Practice when they belong into majority religion, and now here in Tijuana they are, for example, here they bring up an aspect dance group to celebrate Saturday.
Quantitative of the members of this program. I studied previously economics.
Our first world country. A lot of people don't have access. I pay $2,000 a month for my healthcare and my son, and I have to wait 2 months to get a basic general appointment or go to the emergency care. So it's not good, and I pay good money. And it's good to know that healthcare workers, they're for universal health care. Some are for universal health care. You would think it's the contrary, they might get paid less, but some are for it, and we should be listening to them. So CAPA is a very good organization that
So I want to invite Stephanie Gamboa, one of the students who participated, to share a few words, and then we hand it over to Professor Cynthia Duarte or Professor Akiko, who should be here.
Hi, good morning. I am here and I'm going to try to convey what I learned from my visit to the Transitional Migrant Center. So one thing that stands out, the human soul starts to see that there is community at the center. And it's surprising because these people are leaving, they're coming from really difficult situations, and you would expect them to be having a hard time, but for some reason they assimilated very well. And one would wonder, what is the nonprofit doing to make it work? So what we noticed that the nonprofit had to do is they found common things with the people. They were coming from different countries. Sometimes they come from all over the world, but currently during our visit, the ones staying there were mainly from Latin America. They were families. Unfortunately, you have to navigate differences, and the migrant centers had to make certain adjustments, so only families were there. So that meant that single men and adolescent children that were men had to go to a different facility. But nevertheless, it was successful because these folks, they were together, they were laughing, they were helping each other, taking care of their children. They were able to do this because the nonprofits were strategic. They were teaching them skills. They were teaching them how to do basic trades. They had social workers teaching them about work opportunities nearby. They had medical care on site, and it was really nice to see that the shelter not only was teaching them giving them a survival space, but they were teaching them, like empowering them to adapt on their own. So what we learned is that many of these families, they built a sense of cohesive community that after a while they have to leave the shelter. They would form unions so strong that they would leave together as a family and find a space. And I found it very empowering that these nonprofits had created a pathway to not only give them a temporary space, but to empower them for success in the future. It was an amazing experience to see that all we need is some few things in common to make things work. And thank you for your time. I hope you guys have a great conference.
It's my pleasure to invite my esteemed colleagues, Cynthia Duarte and Akiko Yasuke, who have been studying immigrants in Ventura County and other places, and their research is based on that topic. I believe they're coming with their student, Jonathan Leon. So please, there are time, to listen and maybe ask questions. We're building a little more time, so that's good, to be more relaxed other than going from one to another quickly. Cynthia.
Hi, everybody. We are the qualitative team of this research that we're doing. I'm Cynthia Duarte. I'm assistant professor of sociology here at Cal Lutheran. I'm also the director, I'm supposed to be in the mic better. I'm also the director of the Center for Equality and Justice. Wanted to introduce Dr. Sabath Khan, who I know a lot of you know. He's also part of the qualitative team. He's been really instrumental, particularly in terms of our research on remittances, as well as helping us navigate and network with some of you guys in the community. I'll go ahead and let, I'll introduce you. Want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dr. Akiko Yasuke in sociology, and I'm a part of this team, and I will talk later. Thank you.
Yes. This pilot study Akiko and I were co-facilitators of the Culver Scholarship Research Opportunity for students in the social sciences here at Cal Lutheran. So we had a few students that were working with us to put together the literature review, to help with establishing the interview guide, and then doing some pilot research in this project. Yay! And so we're gonna give them a time to take a deep breath, but we also have Jonathan Leon here, who is a senior in the sociology department. And so he's one of our students that was part of our research. So you'll be hearing from him and what he did, as well as some of the other findings that our other two students discovered for us. So we are very excited to be here today because we really need to meet you, and please, we'll be kind of walking the room, and hopefully you can introduce yourselves to us. We are still in the collection phase of our data, and we need as much help in the community as we can. So please, if you have questions afterwards, find one of us about the research, about collaborating, perhaps helping us with finding respondents. We'd really, really appreciate it. So really simple, who we're looking for in our research, we are looking to interview adults who've migrated from Mexico and settled in Ventura County, preferably within the last 10 years or so. We want a more recent experience, so it's not hard and fast, oh, you didn't come on this date by 10 years, but we want sort of a more recent experience, because what's been happening in Ventura County over the last 10 years, I think, has been a significant there have been significant historical moments. The Trump administration, SB 54, right? There have been significant things that have happened, and so we want folks that have kind of engaged with that in a more recent way. We prefer those who've migrated as adults. I understand, though, that that's not always the experience, but what we're sort of not looking for is we're not looking for the children of undocumented immigrants who came and settled and went to school here. We're looking for folks who've engaged with the labor market. So, you know, it's okay if people are young, but more sort of folks who came to sort of engage with the labor market in Ventura County. Obviously, recruiting during COVID-19 was very, very challenging. You know, our students and all of us did you know, as best as we could, but it was a really challenging time to recruit respondents. So we're kind of ramping up, ready to get going, our interview guide's ready, and we're excited about meeting with more members of the community. Thank you. So our thesis is very simple. What is the migration experience to Ventura County? As a complement to the quantitative team, who are doing really important work on economic and other drivers that help, that drive people to make the decision to leave Mexico and come to Ventura County, we as a qualitative team are conducting interviews to really understand, again, what is the migration experience to Ventura County specifically. Key areas of inquiry, right, to complement the quantitative team is settlement, right, reasons for migration and settlement. We also want to understand their local and transnational networks. What is their economic well-being? To put simply, how are you getting by? What is life like here? How are you juggling things? And of course, in our most recent history, COVID-19, that has had a tremendous amount of impacts on this community. Ultimately, right, sort of the cloud that many of these this population is living under is a cloud of anti-immigrant sentiment, is a cloud of policies or practices that are not welcoming to this population, regardless of how much they contribute. And so we want to sort of understand that experience as well. Okay. So I'm going to take on sort of our first section of our research, which is comparing, we will be comparing the economic and migration data that the quantitative team collects, as well, and then inputting sort of what we find from folks in our community about their migration and initial settlement. What are their drivers? What are their important networks to make those initial decisions? Transnational experiences. How do they engage with remittances, kinship ties, networks, and of course labor participation, particularly as they enter into the labor market. So next slide. So the reason for migration and settlement. People have a variety of drivers. What we know from the literature is that there isn't one reason why someone would make the decision to come to the United States. But we want to capture those stories. For example, this one person talks about what they were thinking before they migrated to the United States. I'm not going to read the whole quote just because I know we're limited on time, but I have it up here if you want to continue looking at it. More than nothing, many of us come with a wrong idea that living in the United States will be the same as living in Mexico, when in reality, it's not the truth. Well, it could be, but not many people do it. Not a lot of people live in the same place. They rent, but only a certain number of people are permitted to live in the same place. And regarding the living situation here, you know that it is very expensive. Here, everyone must accommodate themselves to their own possibilities, but many come with the belief that it is easier to live here or that they will live like they did in the United States. So capturing this is what I thought there, this is what the reality was, we think that kind of story is really important to tell in terms of really understanding how someone is navigating the experience coming here. Just to also point out, these are translations. So our interviews were done in Spanish, so these are English translations. Thank you to our students who also did the amazing translations for us. That was a lot of hard work. Initial work experience, entering the labor market here in Ventura County can be really challenging. The networks might not be well established here in the United States, and that first job you get may actually have elements of exploitation, or you may not understand the labor market, and that becomes very challenging. For example, we have two two respondents here who talk about the challenges when they first entered the labor market here in Ventura County. One talked about being exploited in terms of her pay. However, they would pay me poorly, according to the lady, since she was only helping me. She would give me so much plus food when a person who worked regularly at the taqueria was paid double. So regular pay was somewhere between $180 to $200 a week, and they would only give me $100 and food. But it was something, so I decided to take it. So these stories are gonna be very common. Another one worked in domestic work and found it really challenging, particularly entering Ventura County. She said, I worked for about 8 years with an American family taking care of children as a babysitter. I didn't understand any English and didn't know a word of English. At that time, it was very difficult for me. I told my sister, I'm not going to work there because I don't understand anything. So she goes on to say in this quote, right, that it was really stressful. There was a lot of pressure in this home. Even if the people who she was working for tried to sort of teach her English, she said it was really difficult. And in the research on domestic work, we find that live-in situations are the most stressful, sort of, but often, always, not always, but often that first domestic work job that someone coming to the United States might get. Ultimately, she finds this to be very, very stressful and ends up leaving this home after 8 years and decides that the fields are actually a place where she's going to have a better economic chance here in Ventura County. We also know from the literature, and we see in some of our first interviews, that the reason to come to the United States is so that you can help family members back in Mexico. And so we're gonna have examples of this. But I think what's key here is, even though the literature tells us that, what I think is wonderful about qualitative work is you get to hear the nuance of how people are framing their help back home, what they're doing, what the sacrifices they're making in their life here in order to make that possible. So again, like many of our immigrants in our community, right, I was working day and night. I would leave at 4 a.m. to go to work all the way to Fillmore. I would pick chiles and jalapenos. I would then go home and shower and eat. I would pack my lunch, go to the warehouse, right? This sort of multiple jobs, intense labor in order to make ends meet and to help out back home. Another respondent was, I was the youngest one, but I also had a younger brother, and I told myself, I'm going to work so my brother can study and go to school because I didn't have that chance to. So again, these international ties, remittance ties, emotional ties are very important to our residents here in Ventura County. In terms of our next section is in terms of getting by here, I'm going to hand that over to Akiko. Thank you very much for your time.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Good. Okay. How can I follow such an excellent presentation, right? But I will make it easier for my student, Jonathan, our student, Jonathan Leon. Okay. So our study also explores how undocumented immigrants in Ventura County navigate everyday life in here. So once you are here, so settling down, and then a lot of actually struggles they experience, and how they navigate or deal with struggles or obstacles that they face with. The first, what we have actually 4 areas that we pay attention to. The first area is social networks. And a lot of literature indicates that social networks are fantastic and they can help newcomers in particular settle down and getting a job, everything else. But also social networks can be burdens. Sometimes the social networks can be exploitative also. So just we will pay attention to that. Second part is economic well-being, how they economically survive, generally speaking. And then I can tell that they are not making really a lot of money, but in new area, and Ventura County, just in my family class, we talked about median income in Ventura County. Actually, median income in Ventura County is higher than median income in LA County. So it's really harder to actually make a living or live a comfortable life, and how they manage to do that. And number 3, legal concerns and anti-immigrant sentiment. So that was a really big thing. And when we were under the previous president's policies, and how they dealt with fear of deportation, and also ICE and then police when they go out there. And number 4, lastly, access to healthcare and the impact of COVID. This is a big thing, and a lot of literature indicates that oftentimes, and so my students also said that, even, my dad fainted, and we were all just so concerned about him, and then, called for ambulance, but then he said that, no, don't call for ambulance because it's gonna be very expensive. So oftentimes they sacrifice like a health for whatever they need to kind of cover in the household. So these are the 4 areas we focused on. Okay, but for our presentation, me and then Jonathan, and we are going to focus on the last 2 themes. Oh, thank you. Okay, so the 3rd theme this is a fear of ICE, police, and the deportation. All participants talked about their fear, basically. The first, so she did not read the quotes, but I will. We had a very difficult time when there were raids. Where we work, then the bosses told us not to go out. They are doing raids, don't go out. Those with papers went by car to look for immigration officials, and they spoke on the phone with the boss. They would tell us not to go out because immigration is at all the corners. There was one on that side. He filled 2 buses, and they were on the other side, about 3 blocks away, 4. So this participant actually experienced some ICE raids while working in the fields. Okay. Thank you. So I will skip the second one, but you can probably take a look at it later. Because we are running out of time, and I want to give enough time to Jonathan. Okay, so, but there is Ventura, I don't know, but especially in California, which is a sanctuary city, but no, I do not feel safe, because this interviewee was asked if he feels safe in Ventura County, and basically he said no, even though he knows that California is a sanctuary state. In reality, there hasn't been much pressure by ICE, but regardless, because of President Trump, there was always the uncertainty of being 30, 40 years old and not having papers. There is always that thought in your head that in whatever moment it can happen to you, especially if you have small family. So just as I said, this participant did not feel safe living in Ventura County, particularly under Trump administration. But what we started to notice is that even president changed, but still the lingering effect is in there. I'm not going to read the next one, but somewhat, okay, even now the new president, the situation changed, but that kind of feeling of kind of fear, and it can happen, and still that seems to be affecting many immigrants. Okay, next I will pass this to Jonathan Leon, our student, and a fantastic student. We had 3 students who received Culver Research Fellowship, but 2 of them already graduated, so I want to recognize them. And Amber Mendoza, a psychology major, and also Yvonne Sanchez, criminal justice and criminology major. So they already graduated, so for that reason, they are working up there. So that's the reason why they are not with us. But still, Jonathan is with us. He is going to, he is a sociology and Spanish double majors. He will discuss healthcare among undocumented immigrants. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? Great. So this is the first this is the first presentation that I've done in front of a big audience like this. But I want to go through a little bit of the literature review that I've done. Some of it talked about how social networks have such a positive effect on, in general, people, that they decrease the amount of time that one does get sick and the time that one needs to recover from an illness. I won't read the entire literature review for the sake of time, but there were different ways that social network, meaning social network of people, that they affected both men and women. Some of these detriments included stress, anxiety, and loneliness. And obviously those can increase the likelihood of an illness within the immigrant population. Thank you. In regards to the COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy and the lack of information, one of our interviewees discussed how it was a small amount of people that couldn't or didn't want to, some because of their health, because there were some pregnancies, and they were unsure of whether they could or couldn't. This particular interviewee expressed how, unlike herself, there were many individuals who didn't feel sort of comfortable with getting the vaccine due to their pregnancy, as well as that there are many other people that didn't have the necessary information to go ahead and decide whether or not they were going to get the vaccine. Another interviewee said that, well, I was nervous because it was going to hurt. I was scared. I was going to die. OMG. So this interviewer expressed how they were there was a fear of the actual vaccine. So to coexist with the hesitancy and the lack of information, of course, that obviously led to some fear about the vaccine and what its effects could be on the human body. The other part of my project was the financial instability and healthcare, and of course the access to this healthcare. One interviewee stated that, and for us, because of our undocumented status, it is difficult to have general healthcare because it was very expensive. As many of you already know, healthcare is a luxury and not necessarily something that is afforded to everyone, especially undocumented immigrants. So to access this healthcare, they would have to pay out of pocket rather than rely on any insurance or health plan that they have. Another interviewer stated that the reason is one of the many reasons why we don't visit the doctor much or that our health deteriorates a lot is because we are postponing care and instead of use money for things like food to eat. Again, they have to decide whether or not to use that money to care for themselves or to care for their family members by buying the necessities such as food, water, or even pay for their home that they rent or anything like that. Another interviewee stated that because us as illegal or immigrants, however they want to call it, can't benefit from missing 3 or 4 days of work, especially if you have a family, you can't stop working for more than a week, or else you will fall behind on house payments, rent, or other bills you may have. Again, this reiterates the fact that they must decide whether or not they're going to spend that money on themselves to care for themselves, or pay on the necessities like bills, rent, or other house payments. And obviously that leads to the deterioration of an undocumented immigrant health, and of course, again, they must decide whether or not they have to use that money to pay for that health care. All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm concluding our presentation. And it just gonna feel like we are not the experts, you guys are experts actually. And then but maybe you are thinking, oh, Kiko and Cynthia, we all know these things, right? But all of our teams, including students who graduated and also Sabith, right, and sitting there. And what we want to do is to make a contribution to this collective effort to make sure that undocumented immigrants live a comfortable life in Ventura County because they deserve it, and then also we need them, and that they are supporting Ventura County economy from the bottom, and all of us kind of know it. And also we are qualitative researchers, so that means that data for us is life stories of undocumented immigrants. So by obtaining and also presenting life stories of undocumented immigrants, what happened to them, how they felt about what happened, we are trying to put a human face to our immigration debate. They are not the numbers, they are humans. And presenting that life stories to public beyond the communities of immigrants and also allies, right, to the public over there, so that they kind of see them as humans, not just the immigrants or Mexicans or farm workers, not that kind of categories, so that they can relate to them at the basic human levels. So that's kind of what we are trying to do as qualitative researchers. So we will continue our effort by obtaining more interview data So if you feel like you can help us, and please let us know, and we greatly appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, Akiko, and Jonathan. We're going to the last part of the before the break. I have about half an hour, and as soon as I get to my PowerPoint presentation, which we are there, the study that you see a copy of that on your table, I just put one copy because we're still going to do something a little nicer with that so it'll be easier on eyes, because there are about 57, 58 figures and numbers and other things. So let me start, go to the research. It's been going on for the last 3 months. And before I start, let me just tell you what the basic premise of this research is. There are a lot of misconceptions, there are a lot of myths about what undocumented immigrants bring or don't bring. I wanted to do this research to provide verifiable information that separate our conception from reality. And you'll be quite surprised to see that there is a huge difference between the two. So with that, let me, basically what you see here, the breakdown of the research. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the research design, not a lot, because it will confuse many, and we don't have time for it. But you can read extensively in the report how the method was used and employed. I'm going to look at the socioeconomic structured information about undocumented immigrants, and I think there you would probably can see how the misconceptions really prevail in our communities. Then I'm going to look at what is called economic impact. I'm very lucky to be able to do this kind of research, because these kind of data was not available when I did this. Some very good friends asked me that, where'd you get the information about? Isn't it true that undocumented immigrants do not speak to anybody about that? I said, but the magic of the census is that when the information arrives, first of all, it's mandatory to fill it out, and secondly, nobody knows. And there is no question about your status if you are undocumented or non-undocumented. But the other thing is, a lot of this data was not possible without the advancement in data science and other work that's been done in recent years. So with that, let's go to the, okay, I think it's better if I see it from my screen rather than trying to sneak from there, okay? So I can also speak closer to the mic so you guys can hear me. So here are some of the socioeconomic data. There's a bit of demographics and then socioeconomics. I kind of mix them. In the research, you can see that they are separated and talked about differently. So how many of them are in Ventura County and in Santa Barbara? By the way, this study is not just about Ventura County. It's about Santa Barbara, what we call a major part of the central coast of California, 2 major counties. So if you look at the data, these data, most of them come from Migration Policy Institute, MPI, wonderful organization that made this possible. And a lot of them, when you go to the economic assessment, economic impact assessments, comes from USC, from Professor Manuel Pastor, which is really a leading figure on these things, and I really always have a great respect for Manuel. So these are the demographics. About 60,000 live in Ventura County and about 44,000 in Santa Barbara. So what is that red part? Red part is that in the information you get that about 23,000 live with at least one US-born children. And children, by the way, are defined under 18 years of age. So that's important to bear in mind. And then, so I said, okay, let's just use one, which in reality is more than one. So I just added that 1 to the 60, added that 17,640 to the 44,000, and And this is an underestimation of the number of people that live with undocumented families. That's the understanding of it. So if you put it together, that really comes to be almost 12% of the people who actually live in Santa Barbara and in Ventura County. So let's go further. So the next one is the parental status of the undocumented population in Ventura County. If you look at that, you see that, that's really interesting because the enrollment I looked at, because when you look at a particular community, you really want to see how things will develop. It's an opportunity for development, and you miss it, then you've missed it in that period. So you see the first one is 3 to 17 years of age, and the other one is 18 to 24. There are significance about this age break. 3 to 17 are preschooling and also going to elementary and secondary school mostly. And 18 to 24 are the kind of people who go to colleges, okay? So the first one, I mean, if you put this data, take the percentages, you don't see it here, we have somewhere about 13, 14% who really are not in that age of 3 to 17. Some of them are in preschooling, but bulk of them are in other parts. I would imagine that going to a school be mandatory is probably, kind of drop out, did not finish high school would be that. The other category, 18 to 24, is obviously age of going to college and going to community colleges, going to universities. And the numbers are pretty large, the ones that are not doing it, are not going there. All right, let's move on. Health insurance. What Jonathan was talking about earlier on, so you look at here, well, 57% of undocumented immigrants in both counties, funnily enough, I think when the number was wrong, I calculated 3 times. It's 57% do not have health insurance. So I thought, well, let's make it a little starker. Let's look at it, what proportion of people who do not have insurance in Santa Barbara, in Ventura County, form from undocumented immigrants? And the answer is 46 and 57. So essentially, put it this way, overwhelming majority of people who don't have health insurance are undocumented immigrants. Then we're just coming out of COVID. We haven't come out yet. And you see how idiotic that policy is, that people cannot have universal health care or insurance. So you can see that. So the impact is really far more you can possibly imagine. And I'm glad to see that the state of California is changing that policy. I hope that we see that throughout the United States. So educational attainment. Here is another one. If you make a comparison, the 2 charts make it a little faster so I can get to the economic impact soon. So the first one that you see on your left-hand side, it tells you about the percentage of those who are in that level of educational attainment. And by the way, educational attainment is education for population of 25 years and older. So I checked the numbers and they're pretty accurate. So you have about 9% of undocumented immigrants who do have bachelor and graduate and professional degree. You have something about 20% that have some colleges, and you have 39% that have high school diploma or higher. Sure enough, if you make a comparison with what is the, the percentages countywide, educational attainment is lower. But the fact that you think that most of the undocumented immigrants, or overwhelming majority of them, don't have high school is totally wrong, okay? So you can see these are the numbers can give you what Akiko, I think, said about putting human face, I think is very important for us to really have in mind, put a human face on everything that's around. I think economics is, all of it is putting human face on reality of our life. So let's go further about English proficiency. We have enormous amount of what is called social isolation. And one of the leading factors of social isolation is inability to speak and read English. And that is very important. So you can see that we have a very high percentage of undocumented immigrants. And you saw in some of the question, I think what either Akiko or Cynthia were reading from the questionnaire, that when I came here, I didn't really know anything, and then I kind of learned, took me a long time. So what does it mean to be isolated? It means you cannot have access to what every human being is entitled. It means cast aside. It means disenfranchised. It means isolated. It means all the above that can come. So you can this stuff. And then again, language speaking at home, overwhelming majority is Spanish. So let's go into the labor market. On the labor market, I think if you had the age structure, remember, sorry I'm going fast, but I have to do it. I'm trying to make it in half an hour, okay? So you can get to the next break. So if you look at this, the undocumented immigrant, put it succinctly, younger, participate in the labor market more, work very hard. And by the way, often that's the case with the disenfranchised population, that they do actually go to labor market because that's the only way for them to survive. That's number one. So another myth, they kind of, get, or live off our handout or something. That's nothing true at all about it. So if you look at that, the one side, on the left-hand side, you make a comparison that you look at the undocumented in the labor market of the county. And the second one is even better, because second one show you, for example, the first one. Let me show that. Total population in Ventura County. So if you look at the in-labor force, employed and unemployed, then compare it, for example, with the undocumented in Ventura County, 74.1% in labor force. Employed 7.7, and by the way, the unemployment rate here, strangely enough, is not really that high because we really are living through some of the difficulties that, although this data goes before COVID, but in general, usually is the case. Labor force participation higher, unemployment higher too, because they do have, that kind of possibility of not getting a job easily. This one is we're going now to the area where we are looking at the economic impact. So the first one is Ventura, second one, Santa Barbara, and then the third graph is what proportion of these industries are undocumented. So pay attention to the last one. 70% of farm workers, people who work in agriculture, are undocumented in Ventura County. 80% in Santa Barbara. And by the way, I do have the little bit of problem, I have to say that. I put a lot of endnotes usually in my studies, so you can see it there. That 70% is because in census, when you take the industry, mining is combined with agriculture. I don't know why they do it that way, but that's what it is. So if you really want to filter it out of the mining and others, it's even higher than that in both countries. But construction, quite significant. You look at retail trade, look at manufacturing, look at other services. Now, this data actually came, I use it from USC. Why? They a little bit underreported the number of employed, but they had good breakdown on 9 industries. Okay, so I have to tell you a little more about that, how you went about it. We use Implan. Implan is a software that allows you to measure economic impact. And in Implan, when you run your model, you get 3 impacts, direct impacts. Means that these many people work in agriculture, and that's how much is produced. So that's direct effect. Then you go to what is called indirect effects. Indirect effects is that when that industry is working, there are economic interactions between other industries, between businesses. So that's another layer of impact. Then you go to the induced. Induced is as a result of activity, earning income, spending, you get another layer of impact. So what I do, what I've really done in writing rather than in graphs, I added the indirect and the induced together, and I showed, I have one final thing, later on I'm going to show you, watching myself not to really go over time. So if you look at that, I put the induced and indirect is what every job of undocumented immigrant creates in the county. What production that comes from one generates in addition in the county. what amount of taxes they generate. So we can see it in those lights, and those can probably convince us what is the benefit of undocumented immigrants for others. Not for themselves, for others. So you put that to me is the degree of interdependence. I'll repeat again, degree of interdependence. We in every society live as interdependent human beings. We are like bees, like ants. We live upon each other. We interact with each other. There is no one which is an island into herself or himself. There is nothing like that. It's a misconception. Put it aside. That's not true. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show with figures rather than words. Okay, although I do bring words also. Okay, let's go to the economic impact. 4 things I looked at. By the way, I've got more than that I could share, but the 4 things I looked at is output, labor income, employment, and tax revenue. Okay, so these 4. And then I kind of reported on each, again, in the manner that I explained. Let me go a little further. I had to take out of 546 industry, I had to dissect 9 industries, which means I had to do a level of aggregation. And in order to do that, you have to have a way of filtering. For example, somebody says that, are anybody of undocumented working in Amgen? I don't know. Maybe they are. But I had to do what? I had to do something which is not be considered as exaggeration. Okay? So I'll repeat again, overestimating, exaggeration. Because when you do that, you really kill your work. It's all exaggerated. Oh, they can be making up that. So you heard Gerhard earlier on, what they talk about, that article that came out. So I had to be absolutely conservative about it. Conservative means that take the industry that you can say that I use an underestimation. What are underestimation? I took educational attainment at 1. I already set it very low for those industries. I also took what? Median income, okay? So I couldn't really resist not to report this chart in the bottom of that slide that you see. So I took the median income, because the median income usually says that these are the 50% lower income earners, okay? And I took that, and based on that, I calculated annual income for the industry, and then we filtered everything, in all these 546 to pick up those that live up to those kind of lower salaries. However, if you look at the median income in Ventura County, look at the 2019. Median income for migrants is $17. For non-migrants, the rest is what, 27. This is called wage gap. Wage gap. This means people do not earn for the same work, the same income, okay? That is what is, by the way, you know what one of the biggest wage gap is? Gender wage gap. That's my next target, to calculate something in Ventura County later on. That how much is denied. So when you deny that, you misrepresent even GDP. You miscalculate GDP because you do not value work of undocumented or women or African American the same as you do others. So our calculations are wrong. Anyway, so I had to put that. Now let's go look at quickly on the impact. The first one is regional output, okay? If you look at the regional output, on the left, you see Ventura. On the right, you see, correct, yeah, on the right, you see Santa Barbara. Let me put it bluntly. $5.4 billion are generated because of the work of undocumented immigrants in Ventura County, direct. Then you add the other 2. I'm not going to add them now because I have one complete at the end. That's called indirect. Percentages, you can add them together. So, and the same in Santa Barbara. So when we say that, if you ever imagine, anybody with sane mind, imagine that Ventura County, California, United States, can go economically in where we are now without undocumented immigrants, as insanity. It's not really a proposition. It's insanity. It's impossible, to do that. The next one, you see employment effect. Oh, that one I have to really, a little pause on that. If you look at the employment effect, so 38,239 are the people who actually are undocumented and working in those 9 industries that I talked about. But add the other 2. The other 2, that you add them, comes to be the extra work extra employment generated because of the work of the undocumented immigrant. You see it later on that every undocumented immigrant generates 0.4 of additional work, okay? And then I added them up. You know, I don't want to spoil the fun for later on, so I'll get to that, you know, later. So this is the evidence of interdependence I'm talking about. Let's move on. Tax. So what do we hear about tax? Oh, undocumented immigrant, you know, spending our tax money, we're feeding them, and that kind of stuff. Absolutely the other way around. It's not true at all. So when you talk about tax, tax is generated from a variety of areas. Tax is generated from production. Tax is generated indirect tax. There are so many. In fact, the new implant, and my friend, you know, Kirk Lish is at the end because he works on this kind of model too. If you look at that, the new implant is fantastic because it breaks down the tax to the county level, to the state level, to everything else. And it was very fun to work with the new model. So generally speaking, we generate hundreds of millions of dollars in various forms of tax because of the work of undocumented immigrants. Hundreds of millions, okay? So we'll come to that calculation later on. A statewide impact. Let me tell you why a statewide impact you see is higher than the county. Impact is like this. You have a pond here, you drop a stone. We hit the water, starts generating waves, okay? The bigger the pond, the further the wave travels. That's why usually, under special circumstances, the other way around, you get county impact bigger than, state impact bigger than county. So you see that, and I thought that, you know, living in California, we have to really bring the state also into this picture. So these are what is generated statewide. 6.5 billion, or 6.6 actually, if you round it, generated statewide. Say in Santa Barbara, then you can move on from there, go to the employment, and you have a copy of it on your desk for everybody. So I can go a little faster on that, okay? I think I'll do. So employment, then we have tax impact. Again, breakdown for Ventura and Santa Barbara within the state of California. That's the term to add, the bigger pond, okay? And this is the summary. The summary of this is here. Okay, let me just go on the total. If you look at the total, the Ventura County is 8.3 billion in terms of regional output. If you go on employment, 54,280, which is 38,239 direct, 16,041 indirect and induced together, which means those 16,000 plus are not undocumented immigrants necessarily. This is the interdependence I was talking about. This is how we interrelate to each other. So they create 16,000 more jobs, okay? So you go the same thing for the Santa Barbara. So in Santa Barbara, we get, about 11,000, almost 12,000 extra jobs created because of their work. Tax revenue is impressive, right? Look at that, $1.4 billion for Ventura County. You know, don't translate it as this is how much they pay tax. No. This is how their work creates through economic interactions, okay? The two different things. Yeah, they do pay some of it themselves too. And by the way, undocumented immigrants, like everybody else, pay Social Security, they never get it back. So you want to see, you know, who is paying who? That will tell us a little more about it. So you can go on that and look at the region, and then I put them together. By the way, I didn't run them together because it would create some technical problem. I did them separately and then kind of summed them up. So I want to make recommendations. In the report, by the way, I'm not yet in half an hour, I've got 3 minutes. So if you look at the suggestions, recommendations, I make 3 levels of the recommendations in the report: state, nation, and county. Here I'm just going to talk about county because the state and nations are good. County is us here. So here are my recommendations. I want to go through each one of them. create a county-wide regional forum. This stuff is like today we're here, this kind of stuff, organized. I give an example. I see Vanessa Bactella, my friends from ECCF, others here. So if you look at that, they're doing this for Isabella Project. What is Isabella Projects? Isabella Project's about early childhood education in Santa Paula. And when they're working on that, they're not working in silos. They're trying to bring everybody on the table, okay? So this is where the things are. We have to bring this out in the community, discuss them, have discussion together. And then protecting lives of undocumented. Yes, sanctuary counties. What's wrong with that? We have 20 in the state of California. LA is one of them. They should consider it. Why not? Consider becoming sanctuary county in here and in Santa Barbara. That's a very concrete proposition that we can discuss and talk about it. Bring attention to providing resources, assisting undocumented immigrants to benefit from existing provision. You know what entitlement is? Entitlement means tested is a battle between something which is supposedly exists but very few get. Now I saw that the paper I just recently had published, that in the state of California, early childhood, we got a lot. Nobody gets it. It's written that you can get it if your family income is 331% average. We calculated. You're entitled to early childhood, provisions by state. Who's getting it? You know what 331,000% of family income is? It's 6 figures. We're not getting it. Universal. Universal is the good one. You don't have to prove it. You pay tax for it, or others who should pay tax, and then you have it for everybody. Helping underserved community to help themselves. This means empowering. Empowerment is a very important thing in social change. Make supporting the existing DACA recipient a priority in every organization, college, university. Consider it as an essential element of DEIJ, which Leanne was talking about earlier, how California Lutheran University focused and things are. This is important, bring it there, it's real. So, yeah, so I put them in bold, talk about the issue a little more. Bring a much higher level of assistance from the nonprofit sectors. Our nonprofit sectors are wonderful there, help us, assist us, bring them to the purview, focus of this, and increase legal aid to undocumented immigrants, okay? So these are my suggestions, these are my proposal, and quite honestly, I finished 3 minutes under my time. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now we can have a nice break, okay? So we're going to resume in 15 minutes. Thank you. It's moderated by Dr. Khan, director of our MPPA program. So I'm going to just invite Sabit and go and find somewhere to sit and enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
Check. Good morning to all of you. And for those of you who just got here, my name is Sabit Khan. I'm the program director for the Masters in Public Policy and Administration program. So we have a panel with 4 very exciting speakers who come to us from very, very different backgrounds, very different perspectives. So let me first invite them to sit on the table and then let me introduce them. First we have Yisel Barajas, the Chief HR Officer from Ryder Affiliated Companies. We have Alvaro de Regil, who is, I think, outside, but he'll be with us in a moment. We have Ms. Maureen McGuire, CEO of the Farm Bureau of Ventura County. We have Ms. Nidia Bello from CAUSE. And Alvaro is joining us momentarily. So let me introduce each one of them before we I hand it over to them. And the format that I have in mind is each person gets 10 minutes. Each one has a presentation. And following that, we have some time for Q&A. So roughly about an hour for the entire panel. And we hope you learn from them as much as you learned from the presentation before, which was based on research. So these are practitioners. So let me make a quick round of introductions. As I said, Isel Barajas is the Chief HR Officer of Rider-affiliated companies, and her role involves participating in community projects that inform the farm worker community, seeding collaborative partnerships and solutions. She has a master's degree in urban planning from UCLA and is an alumna of Class 40 of the California Agricultural Leadership Program. Alvaro de Regil is the Executive Director of Jus Semper Alliance, a think tank based in Ventura County, a coalition that supports living wages worldwide and as a core element of sustainability, democracy, and business accountability. And his work is centered on developing a people and planet paradigm. Maureen McGuire is the CEO of Farm Bureau of Ventura County, and she has an MA from the New School University and a Six Sigma Black Belt from the University of Southern California, Wettebury School of Engineering, and she began her work in Ventura County in farm labor contracting. Finally, we have Nidia Bello, who for the last 3 years has been working with the Central Coast Alliance for Sustainable Economy. And as a community organizer, Nidia has worked with young adults by organizing to improve air quality in South Oxnard and strengthen tenant protections by pushing for local rent control. She is now the Santa Paula policy advocate and continues to support immigrant rights efforts in the county. So let's start with Isel Barajas and her presentation, and I will help you with the slides.
Did you have a PowerPoint?
No.
Okay, good.
I wasn't asked for
All right.
All right. Is this okay?
no worries.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. If we could go to the next slide. So, a Rider-affiliated company, so it's an agricultural company here in Ventura County. We also grow in other parts of the coast and the U.S. We've been farming in Ventura County for about 50 years. Next slide, please. The mission of our company is the relentless pursuit to delight our consumers and enrich our employees and communities. And we do this through our values of honesty, fairness, and respect. We believe that by producing a quality product, we can create a work environment where we can provide attractive earnings opportunities for our employees, and also collaborate with the community to be able to provide needed resources for them. I want to give you a view of who our employees are, just to continue to put a face to our immigrant community. These are statistics based on our operations here in Ventura County. The average age of our farm workers is 35. This number keeps increasing year over year. The national average is 41. We employ about 50% male and 50% female. The average number of children that our employees have is 3, and this number keeps decreasing, and it's getting closer to 2 as the average. They have been employed with us an average of 6 continuous years. So while we have people that have been working with us over 20 years, the average is 6 continuous years. And we do, as the ag employee population ages, there's not many people that are filling the vacancies. So we are using the H-2A program, which is a visa program provided to workers that come from Mexico. And currently, about 11% of our workers have this visa. And coincidentally, they come from a lot of the same communities that our local employees come from, the communities of origin. Next slide. Agriculture today is pretty much year-round, whereas 10 years ago, we would see peaks in employment where we would ramp up the number of people we were employing and then lay off. Nowadays, it's pretty constant year-round. The black line you see is 10 years ago, the red line is now. And the reality of Ventura County is that our crops, the variety of crops that we grow in Ventura County allow for this year-round employment, and most of the farm workers live here year-round. They're no longer migrating like they did years ago. The majority are permanent members of our community. Next slide. In 2017, we did a needs assessment survey with our employees, and what we identified as the top priorities for needs for our employees were housing, the cost of housing, obviously the availability of housing, and for those families that do migrate up north to work, the uncertainty of not having housing when they get here for work was also a concern. The second priority was childcare and education. That involved the cost of childcare. The hours that are needed when you work in agriculture do not coincide to the hours available by childcare centers. Some of the programs that are available for farm workers, such as the Migrant Head Start program, unfortunately disqualify many of our workers here because it is built to provide services to migrant families. So literally, families have to migrate to another area in order to qualify. That no longer happens here in Ventura County in general. And also, the way they do the income verification is they take the last 3 months. So if they happen to be when earnings were really good in terms of the peak, that disqualifies them also. So even programs that are meant to support farm workers can no longer support the needs of farm workers in Ventura County. And then the last one, but very important one, as was mentioned before, is healthcare. The cost, the access to quality care, and then the cultural barriers, including language. We as an employer can't solve these areas alone. So what we do is we partner with community resources. Next page. In terms of housing, we've partnered with the ag community and also the Ventura County Community Foundation to start the Farm Worker Household Assistance Program. This program helps support households that need support with rent or any other household expenses that arise out of the COVID-19 pandemic, but have been continuing and ongoing. We are collaborating currently with Ventura County for the Ventura County Farm Worker Housing Study. We're part of the advisory council, and it is designed to identify the needs and try to create policy solutions. And then we generally do sponsorship and advocacy through house farm workers around education, advocacy for projects that are going on in Ventura County, and other education. In terms of childcare, if I failed to mention, but what we found in the study is that the largest number of kids are either 0 to 5 or 13 to 17. So what we try to do is partner again with community resources that provide services to this age group. So we've partnered with Boys and Girls Club in Oxnard to provide after-school program by sponsoring the Ryder Family Youth Center. We have partnered with Cal State Channel Islands on work they're doing around starting an early childhood center that specifically includes the needs of farm workers. And as was mentioned before, we're also part of the group that's working on Project Isabella in Ventura County. And again, just trying to support the different resources that are available. In terms of education, we've worked with Oxnard College to try to provide education around college opportunities and higher education opportunities, also with Cal State Channel Islands and with the Boys and Girls Club, and highlighting agriculture as a career opportunity for students in Ventura County. In terms of healthcare, healthcare. As an employer, we offer free primary health care to all of our employees through the Western Grower Cedar Health and Wellness Center. That includes free medication as well, and low-cost option for the family. We also offer major medical insurance. We were very active in COVID-19 outreach and advocating for vaccines to be available at the ranches, vaccines and education, and we partnered with Ventura County Public Health on this. And this was a big effort that is now called the Farm Worker Healthcare Collaborative, and this group continues to work on different health issues impacting the farm worker community. We also partner with Ventura County Food Share to provide food distributions at our ranches to support the families. And then in terms of policy, we have worked very actively with different ag associations and organizations on different efforts to pass immigration reform. Unfortunately, that has not happened, but we continue to be active on that. And we also partner with VCCF on the Census 2020 outreach to ensure that the needs of the farm workers, the count and the needs of farm workers are included. So it does take a community to call a place a home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Barajas. Now we have Alvaro with his presentation.
Thanks, Amit. I don't have an actual presentation. I wasn't asked to prepare one, but the focus of my work on immigration has been the underlying causes of immigration. Why immigrants come here. So to start, I would like to ask you, the audience, why do you think that immigrants come here? What is the usual reason that you can think of, the conventional reason that you can think of? Yes?
To support their families.
Okay, to support their families. Anything else? Yes?
Well, in search of a better life, more opportunities.
Why in search of a better life? What is their condition that they search for a better life? Yes?
They do not feel safe at home anymore.
Okay.
For work.
Okay. Yes?
Poverty.
Poverty. Okay. Anyone else?
Political violence and corruption in their home country.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, on my research, what I found is that, and probably you have seen that, especially in mass media, the conventional wisdom in general, encompassing all of the reasons that you already mentioned, is because they are poor and we are rich. That's the conventional wisdom. But what they never ask about is why they are poor. Why are immigrants poor? Well, the reason is that there are economic structures on both sides of the border that basically destroy any opportunities in their communities to have access to a quality of life that they can enjoy, that they can live with dignity. So they can come here. I mean, they are forced to come here because there are no opportunities there. But these structures are a deliberate system of exploitation that I call a system of modern slave work. Let me give you an example in the manufacturing sector, because these are hard fact figures that the source used to be for many decades the US Department of Labor. The usual example that I use is, and I use it with a question, why do a worker that works for a Ford Motor Company in Dearborn, Michigan, assembling in the assembly line of production 3 parts in the Ford Focus, why does he get paid $40 an hour? And then if we go to Hermosillo, Mexico, at the Ford assembly plant there, they also assembly the Ford Focus. And this car is a car that is exactly the same quality, and 80% of the production is exported to the US and to Canada, and they earn about $5 an hour, okay? Well, you can say, well, it's because there is a huge difference in the cost of living. Well, according to the World Bank, for the last 20 years, the average cost of living in Mexico is 60% the cost of living in the United States. So that means that for what Jamshid was saying, equal pay for equal work of equal quality, if the cost of living in Mexico is 60%, then that person should have been paid not $5, but 60% of $40. That's about $24. So they cannot make a dignified quality of life with $5 an hour. So they start looking for other opportunities. And in this situation in Mexico, with what you mentioned, insecurity, crime, exploitation, all of that, many workers find that they only have 3 choices when they lose their opportunity to enjoy a dignified quality of life, and that's they can go to the big cities in Mexico and live in the worst neighborhoods and work in what is called the informal or underground economy, and of course they would be completely exploited, living under really terrible conditions. The other another option is to join the mafias, the narco mafias, and the other option is obviously to come here. So many choose to try to immigrate to the United States. Now, if we move to the agricultural sector, what happens in NAFTA is that US farmers got subsidies for $20 billion. So with those subsidies, they flooded the Mexican market, for instance, with corn that they were selling at a price below the cost of production of corn in Mexico. That, and this is another hard fact, caused the loss of 2 million jobs in Mexico in the agricultural sector, okay? And that means that about 8 million people lost their livelihoods because the average number of members per household is 4. So if 2 million jobs were lost, you can say that about 8 million people lost their chance to continue living in their communities. So they had no choice but to choose one of the 3 options. And again, they came here. So if you change the perspective, in a way, people in Mexico subsidize our quality of life, okay? Because and this is all linked to what is called the global supply chains and labor arbitration, which means that corporations go to the place where they can find the lowest wages that they can pay to increase their shareholder value. People try to come here, and but a lot of people are still producing in Mexico for the export industry. That makes a huge difference, because if those jobs were here, the cost of production and the consumer prices would be much higher. We would be paying much higher prices for what we consume. But we don't, because those products are made in Mexico at modern slave work wages. So you can say that in a way, we are unknowingly, in a way, contributing to this system, and we get a subsidy in the prices that we pay because of the really low wages that are paid in Mexico. So my conclusion is that if we really want to solve the immigration issue, if for all the people that, Gebhard was mentioning a lot of the comments to the article that was featured in the Ventura County Star and in other media, and they said, oh, this is fake news and Satan, and we can't even pronounce their names and all of that. Well, for those people, if they really want to solve the issue of immigration, if they don't want to see any more immigrants, the only way is for both governments to change the policies and force corporations. I know that the gap is so huge that they cannot change from 1 year to the next one, from $5 to $24. But if we talk of corporate social responsibility, if they start gradually closing that huge gap, I can guarantee you that the vast majority of people in Mexico would be more than willing to stay in their communities enjoying a dignified quality of life. So the only way is to address the underlying causes of immigration, to address the root causes of why they come here. Yes, they come here because they are poor, but they are poor because of a system that makes them poor. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvaro, for those thoughtful remarks. Next, we have Maureen McGuire.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank CalLuth for inviting me to participate in this discussion. I'm really honored to be here, and so thank you very much. I am Maureen McGuire. I'm the CEO of the Farm Bureau of Ventura County, and Farm Bureau is a over 100-year-old nonprofit that works in Ventura County for the long-term sustainability of agriculture here. And that means we work on everything and anything that has to do with agriculture. We work on water, land use, and of course, farm worker issues. And so I am just honored to be here and be able to share with you a little bit of my perspective. We are in Ventura County, which is a really great place to grow a lot of crops, especially strawberries and lemons. And I'm originally from Pocatello, Idaho. So that's about 883 miles away, and it is not a great place to grow strawberries. I used to work at a strawberry company, and we also grew strawberries in San Quintin, Baja, which is about 361 miles away. It's a great place to grow strawberries. And for context, Hermosillo is 715 miles away. That's a really good place to grow squash. And Los Mochis, where I worked growing tomatoes, is 1,067 miles away. Really good place to grow tomatoes. So I moved here from Pocatello, Idaho, via a couple other stops for a job. And I actually didn't even need more justification than that. I just moved here from a job from, 883 miles away. Much further than a lot of people that I worked with throughout my career in the fields. And what makes me different than those people is a lot of things, right? Privilege, right? Obviously, I have an incredible privilege but also, in addition to that, documentation status. And as was reported earlier, it's estimated that up to 70% of farm workers in Ventura County are undocumented. There are way better people to give this talk today than me. I tried to get them to uninvite me and give them a bunch of lists of other people that would be better. But then I realized, I kind of have an obligation because I work at an industry-facing position, but I'm not an employer of undocumented workers. And so it's hard to ask someone to come up here if they're undocumented because it's illegal to be undocumented, and that puts them at risk, right? And it's hard to get people to talk about being employers of undocumented workers because it's illegal to employ undocumented workers. And so I felt like I should eventually say yes after some arm twisting because I was in a unique position to have previously worked at several different farming locations and have relationships with people who are living in our community, working in agriculture, who who have this status. So I was thinking to myself, what does it mean to be an undocumented farm worker? Because that's the only perspective I really can speak to. Well, you pay taxes and Social Security on someone else's Social Security number. Your employer pays unemployment insurance that you can't use later if you lose your job. You're always diligent about where you go because you are extremely vulnerable. So the other day I was visiting a ranch and I happened to see an irrigator that I used to work with, and he ran up to me and he was really excited to show me his driver's license. And he had now official driving privileges. And so I looked it up, and those became available in January of 2015. It took him 5 years to build up the courage to go to the DMV. He had to see dozens of his friends go through the process, and a mutual friend of ours drove him to the DMV and sat with him because this was a place that he perceived as being risky and a threat to him and his family because of his documentation status. So even the DMV, the most boring place on the earth, is risky for undocumented people. I want to give an acknowledgement to the Farm Worker Resource Program that really works in Ventura County to give people who are afraid to interact with different government agencies a place to go where they can feel safe. So they're kind of a one-stop shop for people who need assistance in, getting access to benefits or understanding their rights, getting educated around wage and hour issues or other issues that are preventing them from living a safe and happy life here in Ventura County. So I know we have a lot of that group here, and I want to just acknowledge them and the work they do in multiple indigenous languages, including Spanish. One thing we talk about a lot is how your document status can make you ineligible for federal and state funded benefits programs. Also, you can't go home to see your dying parents or attend a loved one's funeral. You have limited options for the type of work you get to do despite your skills or talents. Another farm worker that I know crossed the border with his wife and child over 15 years ago. His second and third children can become president because they were born here in Ventura County, and his first can't. All because of the timing of her birth. And he has incredible skills. He could get paid 3 times what he makes on the ranch, except that the oil rig work that he wants to do uses E-Verify, and his fake documents won't pass their scrutiny. One of the biggest expenses and economic disparities for farm workers is housing. They spend a huge proportion of their paychecks on housing that's expensive, unsafe, and high density. So I wanted to acknowledge the work of House Farm Workers, which is a grower-founded nonprofit. People got together and said, we need to address this issue, and they work to advocate for real change here in Ventura County. They partner with a lot of organizations, and they're doing the farm worker housing study that Yasel mentioned to gather data on housing conditions. and the need for farm workers to better inform the local advocacy work that we all do, so we can take that information and go get grants and, you know, advocate to our elected officials about the needs of the community. One of the things that really hits home for me working with the farm worker community is really seeing that you just don't get to dream as high. So you can't sign contracts to start your own farming services company. You can't go rent a cultivator and start a little weed cultivation business on the side. You can't buy land to start your own farm. And honestly, the industry is full of amazing entrepreneurs who work as if they own the place, but they can't own it. So I was asked, you know, to talk about what policies would help undocumented workers. And, you know, one of the first things that we can do is work on more affordable housing. I think that's very obvious here in Ventura County. The second, in my view, is the professionalization of the farm worker, creating and reinforcing their ability to dream bigger and build up their sense of place in the workforce, to build skills and talents that build the social and economic capital of each individual, and then also protect them from the downsides of those risks by expanding our social safety net. And finally, I think it's obvious we need to work toward a legal path to citizenship. So those are my recommendations, and I just want to thank you for having me.
Thank you, Maureen. Next we have Nidya with her presentation, and she's from CAUSE.
Hi, yes, can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would like to thank everyone that organized this conference, first of all, for inviting me to be up here. My name is Nidya Bello, and this is something very near and dear to my heart. I'm a DACA recipient, but I consider myself undocumented due to the limbo of my status. And so I just sharing that so you all know where I'm coming from. But yeah, I started at CESI as an organizer. I've been doing this since college. And throughout my past 4 years at CESI, I've been involved in much of the immigrant rights work at CESI. So a little bit about myself, I migrated to the United States when I was 2 years old. I'm from Puebla, Mexico. And I was able to get DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, in 2016. I'm very lucky to have that. And although I have DACA, this is a status that, that it's my experience in the U.S. is still very much of living in the shadows and experiencing some of the issues that undocumented immigrants face, me as well as my parents. And so my experience has been an uphill battle to be in spaces like this. And so I appreciate that opportunity. And CESI has been a part of many campaigns in the past and currently as well. Some of them like SB 54, the California Values Act, and advocating at the county level and the state level to support that legislation. As well as we were also part of the driver's licenses for undocumented folks, and doing various efforts to encourage people to apply for these licenses. So currently, CESI, Central Coast Alliance United for a Sustainable Economy, we are a nonprofit that works throughout the Santa Barbara and Ventura County, and we have amazing organizers that work with community members in Oxnard, Santa Paula, Ventura, Santa Barbara, and Santa Maria. And our focus is to support immigrants and people of color so that they are able to have the tools that they need in order to use their voice to change the current balance of power. And I think that's our focus, changing the current balance of power so that undocumented immigrants and immigrants have the things that they need to thrive in this country. And so, yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the struggles that immigrants face, and that we face working with immigrants. And so what we do is we have house meetings with community members that are impacted by the issues that we focus on, and they themselves identify key issues that are impacting their livelihoods. And so I think some of them have already been mentioned, but I do want to emphasize the issues of housing and workers' rights and even environmental justice and how that impacts undocumented immigrants. And so when we talk to workers, and a lot of these workers are immigrants and undocumented immigrants, they're facing issues of mold in their homes, of broken windows, of things not being upkept in their homes, right? They also face yearly rent increases, sometimes even more than once a year. And this is very, impacts families that, as we all saw, sometimes experience wage theft. We also see people struggling with deposits, as well as more and more we're hearing more people struggling with application fees for housing. So housing is a big issue. There's so many things that are impacting our communities, as well as evictions. And this has become an issue as there's less and less affordable housing in our communities. And so as I myself and my family, we currently experience housing instability. It takes about 4 of our incomes to be able to live in Oxnard, in South Oxnard. And we face some of the same issues of having mold in our house and our landlord not wanting to fix that. And the fear of eviction and feeling like our livelihoods are at risk because of housing insecurity. And so in terms of housing, what COS has done is push for rent stabilization throughout different cities. In Oxnard, we were able to get rent stabilization and cap rent increases at, I believe, 5% in Oxnard. And it's something that many more of our community members want in their cities. It's not something that's going to fix all the housing instability issues, but it's something that gives some sort of security to our folks, knowing that there's a cap of how much rent can be increased every year. As well, we also work to have just cause eviction ordinances in cities so that folks that are protected when it comes to evictions, and they're having a just cause for evictions. And so those are some of the things, some of the campaigns that we are working on in our cities that we work in. But undocumented immigrants face many issues. So moving on to workers' rights, and the things that we hear is about retaliation. For me, it's very hurtful that I'm sitting here while my mother is being exploited as a garment worker in Los Angeles. And this is something that she has to face because there's no other way to put food on the table, right? And they have to, there's fear of retaliation, and fear of not being able to provide for their families. And so that's something that we hear with many of our immigrant workers that we work with. And during the pandemic, there was a lot of fear of their safety and their health. As I mentioned, there is no there's very little space to not go to work, right? And so they choose to put their health at risk in order to continue working. And this is something that our farm workers, essential workers were doing during the pandemic. And so as CAUSE, we did advocacy efforts in the county to make sure that farm workers were being protected, that there were safety guidelines that protected farm workers. And we've advocated for safety measures so that they're protected when there's fires. That's something that we've seen in the county. Currently, we are supporting a statewide campaign called Safety Net for All. I encourage you all to look it up and follow this campaign. In the pandemic, we saw that many essential workers that couldn't work did not have access to unemployment. And I think someone mentioned this is something that workers, they pay into, but they don't have access to it in the state. And so what this coalition is advocating for is for unemployment to be provided for all workers in the state. That's again, like that's an active campaign, and so I encourage you all to look at that. We also advocated for the creation of the Farm Worker Resource Program in Ventura County, which has done amazing work, and our goal is to replicate that in different counties, and so that folks have a center that they can go to. And then I think also, we work on environmental justice, and this is something that our communities have been dealing for a long time. They deal with environmental factors like pesticides and heavy pollution and contamination. We have various campaigns to inform like pregnant mothers that work in the fields about their rights. And we are working in cities to limit the heavy pollution that is often put around our immigrant communities, and so as well as now finding ways for our community to be resilient and continue to live with these environmental changes that we are seeing. And so I think, and our goal is to work with people that are directly impacted with these issues, but we do face some challenges of, these are folks that are usually not at the table. They're underserved, overworked, and disenfranchised, and their priority is to survive. And there's still a lot of fear. And so I really support all the recommendations that have been given today. One of the things that we think that the county can do, and we have advocated, had many talks with the Sheriff's Department about stopping all collaboration with ICE, because this is something that, even though we're in a friendlier immigrant era, right, there's still that fear left over from past decades of immigration enforcement and raids. And so that's a trauma that stays with our community, and it's a challenge that we face to work with folks. And so, I would just like to, I was also asked to give some recommendations, and I think this is a great start of having forums and conferences like this where we talk about these issues and have open conversations. And let's invite more directly impacted people and make sure that they're at the table, and make research available to folks that are impacted, and make it relatable to their living experiences. I think policymakers also have the opportunity to be courageous and prioritize immigrant communities in their legislations. And one of the things that can be done is declaring the county a sanctuary county. Also, a resolution supporting all the stop of all ICE collaboration, and as well as there can be support for statewide legislation such as the Values Act and Safety Net for All that would impact our immigrant community. And lastly, the establishment of a legal aid fund would support immigrants who don't necessarily have access to legal aid or don't have the funding to seek legal aid. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nidia, and all the panelists. We have quite a bit of time on our hands, so we have about 45 minutes for questions and answers. So I encourage all of you to feel free to ask questions to the panel, after which we will break for lunch. So I have a free mic here, so if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand, and the mic will reach you momentarily.
Well, first of all, thanks to all of you for sharing your experience. I am Claudia. My question is, what role can government agencies and other stakeholders play in supporting the efforts of the nonprofit sector to assist undocumented immigrants, and how can they collaborate effectively?
Well, I'll start off. One thing that they can do is make the funds available to nonprofits without strings attached. So building programs that can equally be accessed by people who are documented and undocumented. A lot of times people come and they want to participate in a program that's being offered through the county or the state or federal funds, and you have to turn them away because they don't meet the criteria for receiving that aid. So that's a really easy thing that they could do, is create matching fund pools or other ways of funding programs so that the same resources are available equally no matter what your documentation status is.
Hi, Vanessa Bechtel of Ventura County Community Foundation, and I want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists and the presentation. I just was struck, Gerhard, by your opening and just recognizing how important it is for us to all continue to speak out and talk about this. And I also just want to give a little bit of hope. I was struck by the fact that our community has contributed over $17,285,000 through your community foundation for undocumented individuals over the last several years. And the first 2,500 gifts that came in for the 805 Undocu Fund came from all across the United States. And I just really encourage us to dream big and to also think about that hope, because I think it's really easy to see the negative, frankly. It's hard to get information that's positive out in the news, but if we can continue to dream big, there are thousands of people, over 22,000 donors in this community that I know care deeply about this issue, and what we need to do is give a call to action that's even greater. And I think we're all building toward that, but I just really think today is another step along that pathway, and I just want to say thank you, Dr. Jamshid Demui, Gerhard, and all of those that are speaking on this, because I really do believe that this community is poised to really make a difference.
And I believe Nidia had a comment.
I was just going to encourage government agencies and elected officials to reach out to to nonprofits. We're always willing and want to collaborate, and so reach out to nonprofits and yeah, talk to us about what you care about. We also, we want to work together, and we're willing to have open conversations. And so I think sometimes it just takes that, reaching out and learning about the issues that are impacting our folks and having the courage to advocate for that.
Two things. One, for Giselle, you did mention that the number of children that the parents are having, it's decreasing. Do you have any information as to why that is decreasing? Or
I don't have the information as to why. I mean, I think in general, even in Mexico, the number of children is decreasing. Could be just the cost of raising children, but we did not ask why, families are having less children.
And I also just want to mention about the statistics that was presented to us, the data that was presented to us about the education. I did notice on there that, undocumented employment was very low. I think it was less than 1%, within undocumented employment in Ventura and in Santa Barbara. I'm an educator, and my biggest concern is, especially for all of the agencies that are here, in being able to really promote education, being able to do that. And I know that a lot of our parents don't feel very comfortable. They bring their children and trust them to us and just, say, okay, the educators are going to take care of that. But at the same time, also encouraging them to be able to get involved. There is a lot of funding in schools for migrant and immigrant education, that it is for a lot of these parents, that they can be able to learn other skills, get some kind of education for themselves to be able to have that transformation within their families, and at the same time being able to have that transformation for their children. Coming here myself as an immigrant, I feel that education was really changed whatever I was able to within our families, and being able to work in education, was able to make that change and to offer it to our parents and to our communities overall, in whatever level it is, whether it be early childhood education all the way up to higher education.
Can I respond to that? I think it's really interesting because when I was working kind of directly with farm workers and supervisors and mayordomos, one of the things that was interesting to me was this lack of seeing themselves as the generation to invest in terms of education. So there was a huge focus on keeping their kids in school, making sure that their kids had the opportunity to go to college. I mean, people were sending their kids off to master's programs, but they didn't see themselves as someone to invest in. And I think we could do better in building programs where people who are working really hard see a direct connection between the return on the investment of that time and energy. So, for example, we've worked together with CAUSE, MyCob, Ryder, other growers in the area to develop a field supervisor training. It's a 2-semester program at Ventura College that's free for the employer and for the employee, that teaches conflict management skills and teaches a variety of kind of higher level communication skills for leadership. And this is a workforce development type program, but it's often the first time since maybe second grade that a lot of people have been in a classroom setting, and they're with their peers, but it's still an intimidating experience. And one of the things that I would like to see is part of what is a requirement to make that program state funded is they have to also take ESL, which almost doubles the amount of time that they have to take out. And I would like to see us able to use more funding for programs in people's preferred language without having additional requirements on them, and more in the community for them in places where they're comfortable, on ranches or within their own communities, not needing to come to necessarily a campus. So I think that there's two things. We need to meet people where they're at, and we also need to encourage them to see themselves as worthy of their family sacrifice to build time in for them to invest. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
I would just add to that I think also navigating the educational system is intimidating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Applying to college. And so I think that's why partnering with the local community colleges or high schools or educational institutions to bring that information, because it is intimidating and it is hard to support your kids if you haven't been through that system yourself. And also the after-school programs, right? Supporting the after-school programs, because a lot of the times our parents can't help us with our homework if they don't speak the language or they haven't had the higher education. So after-school programs too are key.
I would just like to emphasize to reconsider requirements and to remove, as many barriers as possible for these folks. There's already a lot going on for them, and so I think that would make it easier to access education resources.
I want to hear what Alvaro thinks about education and the system of power and hegemony and,
Well, education is evidently extremely important. And when I say education, I'm not just talking about education as being extremely important for the immigrant community, but education in terms of what I talk about, which is for the entire country, for the entire population of this country to be re-educated, to understand the real reasons of immigration worldwide, and specifically of immigration from Mexico and Central America and other countries to the United States, and understand that it is not us and them, but it's really a relationship that has been growing, and it has been solidified with the trade agreements to the benefit of capital, to the benefit of corporations, to the benefit of, in fact, I would say that from my perspective, we don't really live in a democracy. We live in a marketocracy, because it is the market that dictates the policies that go to the public agenda. So in terms of education, in terms of public opinion, in terms of information, we are deliberately misguided to think what is really not the truth about immigration. So we would need, in terms of immigration, to re-educate ourselves. And perhaps that way we would find a more humane approach from a big sector of this country that considers that, it's fake news, or I don't care, or whatever. So education, it is very important.
Right, any other questions from the audience?
Hi, Bernardo Perez, currently the board chair of the Ventura County Community College District Board of Trustees, and I wasn't going to really say anything, except education has been prominently mentioned. And thank you for the shout out, Maureen, about the program at Ventura College, and our community college, and UCL mentioning that too. One of the themes that we're working also is meeting our students where they are. And we're not talking about just graduating seniors, but also working adults. and especially those that want to advance in the ag industry and elsewhere. I want to thank those in the room that either are elected officials or represent elected officials or governmental agencies, because what we've heard this morning and what I hope we're going to be hearing the rest of the afternoon is important information that I think will be helpful in getting past the visceral reactions that many of us have heard when the topic of immigration comes up, and as you received from your article, and the human stories are important because, you know, the topic is emotional, but when you hear some of these human stories and experiences that we've heard this morning, I believe that can go a long way in overcoming any negative reaction. So I guess my only question is, how do we keep this going? And one idea that I have and will take and act upon is to share this information with other network groups that I'm involved with, and ask if any of you might be available to be a guest speaker at some of those organizations. So thank you for sharing your stories.
Savit, oh, okay.
Hi, my name is Liliana Manriquez. I work on behalf of MyCop. I'm a program manager for Proyecto Acceso. I want to kind of add in support to some of the commentary on one of the questions that was asked in regards to the decrease of number of children that these families are having. Through the work that I've been doing in the data collection that I have, one of the reasons could be because these families are finally getting an education on taboo topics such as early childhood intervention and also sexual education. Mm-hmm. So when families come here and they get access to these resources, or they have organizations that have these particular programs, they are paying attention to these details and the differences in information that they would have in their home countries. So I just wanted to add that tidbit in support of a lot of the work that everybody up here on the panel is doing. And my question is, in all of your experiences, in the information that you have collected, do you think, in support of all of the causes that we have, do you think more qualitative or more quantitative data collection impacts our causes at county, state, and federal levels? And I want to ask that question because within culturas in Mexico and the Americas, testimonials are powerful. Qualitative research is powerful, but how can we translate quantitative data for those voices to be heard?
Who wants to go first?
Well, the only thing I would say is that those testimonials that you're talking about, if there is a way to quantify how prevalent, how high is the incidence of those specific testimonials, of those specific experiences provided by immigrants, how high they are. If they are very prevalent, then that will have a stronger power of influencing public opinion and governments to draft policies to address those specific experiences that I would assume are expressed in terms of needs that need to be fulfilled.
I think for me, I work more on the grassroots local level, so I don't have a lot of experience on getting huge federal grants, for example, bringing in millions of dollars to address something, but I think it's a combination. So you need to have personal testimony to really give a face to what you're talking about, but you need to also be able to talk about the scope of the need. And another, I think, important part about how to weave those testimonies in is that building up the trust of your organization with agencies and government officials. So making sure that you have a really clear idea of what you're working towards, that you're authentic to your cause, and that you are sharing the information without underselling or overselling the problem, right? So that people, project after project after project, learn, if I've heard this from X, then I can trust that it's true. And I think that building up a reputation of working together, that MyCop and CAUSE and Farm Bureau and other people who work in this space have done, is a really good way of magnifying and elevating the work that all the different partners do. And so I can't see real advocacy working without testimony. But I don't know that we have real resources for epidemiological studies here, but work like what's being done here and what's going to happen through the Farm Worker Housing Survey is definitely essential to inform and shape our requests for funds so that we can direct them to the right places. And I think that there's good collaboration happening in Ventura County that doesn't happen in other places around that.
I would also say that it's a mix of both, but I do want to push on the idea that these testimonies are data. They are based on their real lived experiences, and so as a grassroots organization, we also focus on emphasizing testimonies and stories. And I think for an issue like immigration, it's important to put a face to the issue and humanize the issue. And so I would encourage for testimonies to be prioritized.
That's a great question. I agree with what the others have said, but what I see too is because undocumented immigrants are in the shadows, it's also hard to count, right? And there's complexity around the issue. So I mentioned, the number of children. When we ask someone, how many children do you have? Well, I have one in Mexico and 2 here, for example, right? So how do we count that household size? Even around household, how many people are in your household? Well, I live with multiple families, right? So is that the household or is it just my family? So there's a lot of complexities to the numbers that I think have to be understood. And I think the power of the story is in the testimonial, because what Maureen shared, what everyone shared here, is not in the numbers. It's on the experiences that people have and live. So I think we need to use both to tell the story.
Thank you. Those are really insightful comments. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Trisha Keene. I'm really glad to be here and so appreciate the organizing of this conference and your comments and so forth. Alvaro, for you, I'm thinking in my conversations with people, I have had enough experience to know or feel what immigrants are facing. But in wanting to help others who don't know immigrants, don't have that experience, to help them understand kind of this broader picture about what's going on, where would I get your story about the Ford Focus assembly workers and the difference in pay and so forth? That was really helpful. Where would I find more information like that to provide some background for people to understand that wider context for what's going on?
Sure. Well, the Just Semper Global Alliance started, it was my personal experience. I grew up in Mexico. I was educated in Mexico. I worked for Ford Motor Company, and I worked for 4 years there, and 2 years was in an assembly plant in Mexico City. And I began to notice, because at the same time, part of my work was working with Ford Motor Company workers in London, Ontario, Canada. I began to notice that, it's the same company, but I was a white-collar worker. But probably 50 feet away from me was the assembly line, and I was able to get in touch and mingle with many of the blue-collar workers. And in fact, we went through a strike, which in Mexico is very different from in the US. According to Mexican law, if the trade union of a company goes on strike, that means that the entire facilities of that company are closed, period. They cannot bring other people to work there. So we were on a strike for about 2 months. We had to, because we were white-collar workers, we were not part of the trade union, we had to rent rooms in a hotel to keep working, but the blue-collar workers were on strike. And I noticed that there was a big difference in terms of the quality of life of those workers and the quality of life of for the workers in Canada and in the US. And that's how I began to research. And I found a source that provided me the answers. And that was the US Department of Labor. The US Department of Labor every year publish the hourly compensation cost of manufacturing workers, not just in the automotive industry, but in any kind of manufacturing, for about 24 countries. And that was gradually expanded to about 41 countries. And from inception, they publish the hourly wages of workers in the manufacturing sector in Mexico. And when I compared that, that was really the answer I was looking for. There was a huge gap, but it got worse. The data went back to 1975, okay? And in 1975, manufacturing workers in Mexico were earning about 42%, 1975 to 1980, about 42% of what they should have been paid if they were being paid an equal pay for equal work of equal quality. Okay, but with NAFTA, it went down to 20%. So they lost already, if they were already losing 60% of their fair wage, they lost another 50% of that, okay? And that was because of NAFTA, that was because of the global supply chains. So that was the source until Obama cut the budget, and this office in the Department of Labor stopped producing that source. But fortunately, it was passed on along with many of the employees with the U.S. Department of Labor to an organization in New York that is called the Conference Board. And the Conference Board was publishing that until 2018. They no longer do that. But you can see the data up to 2018, 2019, where in the case of Mexico, you can see how it's, it should be here, and it was here, and then it went down. And then in 1984, exactly in the year when NAFTA started, that's when employers in Mexico and in the United States decided that that was the kind of wages that they were happy to pay, because that would maximize their profits. And so it stayed as a flat line, and it has stayed like that. So I can tell you that even though we do not have new data, I am confident to say that it has remained the same as a matter of a tacit agreement between both economies. So that is the source that I have been using for a long time. The only other way, since this is no longer available, to do that, and I don't have the resources, is to go to the governmental offices of every country, France, Japan, Canada, Brazil, all of that, and ask them for the raw data, then put it together. But I don't have the resources to do that, but that is the most valuable data I have seen available, and that it has enabled me to produce an annual report on that. And not just for Mexico, but for many countries. You can see right away that there is a huge wage gap between the global north and the global south through the global supply chains and labor arbitrage to maximize profits in the global economy. One thing that I would like to add, not on this topic, but in the topic of education, is just a very practical thing, and I'm sure that many of you already know about, but I think that we should keep doing it. Buen Vecino has been doing it since inception. In terms of education, I think it's very useful, and that has worked with the community colleges, Bernardo, to provide workshops to know your rights, to empower immigrants, to empower undocumented immigrants and know their rights, so that since they feel in the shadows, when they know their rights, they probably feel better, because now they know their rights and they didn't before. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvaro. On the note of research, Dr. Damoy has a quick comment addressing the earlier question.
Thank you, Sabit. I want to make a quick comment on that very good question about the qualitative and quantitative research. There's no doubt, I totally agree, that the qualitative research tell you exactly what are the issues. In fact, I would say that qualitative research will enable you to design a relevant quantitative research for it. Let me give you an example. We spoke about, the burden of rent on family, how that really impact the quality of housing. Well, here are the numbers. From the numbers that we have now, 80% of undocumented immigrants in Ventura County and in Santa Barbara County are renters. 80%. Take that and go and find out what kind of financial pressure, what kind of quality of life that creates. So if you really see this together, they're not separate, they're not really more important, less important. It's a collective research based on real issues. The real issues must come from those who are faced with it. I totally agree with that. In fact, my colleagues here, Akiko and Cynthia, can talk more about it than I can. Now, how you actually generate the relevant question. You don't ask the question. The question comes from those who are impacted by it. That really is the kind of research design you do. But you do go for quantitative research, yes. You do go. You have to show, when people talk about that undocumented immigrants, spend our tax money. Yeah, quantitative research tell you that's not true. They generate tax revenue. So I wouldn't really separate them. I see them as combined. And I see qualitative research as a way of designing relevant quantitative research with a human face. That I wanted you to just comment on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Damoy. We still have a few minutes left before lunch, so.
Israel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Israel Vasquez. I think there was a comment that was mentioned, if something was representation, right? And I think that's very crucial when we talk about immigrant and migrant community representation. But how do we create representation, but also not just representation, but accessibility, linguistic accessibility, cultural accessibility. So in events like this, similar, right? We want migrant, immigrant people or documented people to be in the place, but how can we create it when it doesn't fit their lifestyle, right? They work sometimes from 6 to 7, and then, but yet they're not able to be representative because they can't be in the spaces, or some of the spaces that are for them, it's not welcoming to them. They need people that speak their language, that look like them, but in a space that is not so formal, that scares them, right? Like there was a talk about the DMV. Why are they so scared to go to the DMV, right? It doesn't look like a welcome space. So how can we take step and continue to build places that they feel welcome, create accessibility, and create build places where other like undocumented people can have the place, and can also create a pathway for their children to have that representation and be able to sit on the table and be able to give feedback and like real life experience about the changes that needs to be done, not only on the government, but also on the nonprofit sectors. Because I think as representation, accessibility, linguistic and culturally it needs to be there.
Thank you, Israel, for highlighting that. I think that's very important. I think my take is it goes a little into meeting people where they are at, but also prioritizing these communities and not being, prioritizing and making the events work around them and making folks feel comfortable and and I think not encouraging folks to not, have interpretation or language accessibility be an afterthought, but be a priority and something that we always consider.
I think too, the challenge is to the people who have the resources and the power, making the change to increase accessibility for the people that are the most vulnerable or don't have those resources. So, academia has a huge challenge in that. I mean, these are the facilities that are available for this conference, right? This is when the people that need to take this information and turn it into policy are available. But that doesn't mean we can't also take this information out and put it on the Raíces Informativa podcast, right? That Israel is the host of. And that we can't challenge our community and our researchers to go out and communicate in a way. Even the graphs aren't accessible, right? I mean, it's not also a matter of place, it's a matter of style of communication. And I think it's a huge challenge that we all need to do more work in understanding and building more bicultural skills. So I hope you guys keep challenging the content producers to widen their array of who they consider their audience. And, I think CAUSE, MyCop, and Farm Worker Resource Program are these great conduits to the undocumented community. And we need to do better about designing things that can fit into that system in a way that's not putting the burden on them to do the interpretation for us. So thank you for the work you're doing and also for challenging that kind of structure that exists now, because we all need some guidance and learning on how to increase our inclusivity. Yeah.
Thank you for that comment, and also Maureen for adding on to what is possible and what is desirable. So with that, let me call this panel to conclusion and request Dr. Tamoy to hand over a few mementos to our panelists.
We have some gifts, and please don't go away. Lunch is served, and we're back here in 30 minutes. But if you just be there, so Sabita and I will come to. Sure.
Yeah. No, you can go.
I
no.
Like
I put it on.
making the content.
Thanks so much.
Grow a bunch of grass in Mixteco. Thank you. All right. I feel like an alum.
Thank you so much.
Well, this says Alvaro on it.
Folks, just a reminder, lunch is served outside, and we have a keynote speech post-lunch. So be back in 30 minutes. Thank you.
Media. Media?
Here, media. This one's for you. Oh, okay. I think this is for you. Okay, cool. Yeah. I think we're done.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry that I am breaking your peace, particularly having a conversation around the table while having lunch. So I'm going to start our afternoon session, which is going to start with our keynote speaker, who's come from Mexico here. We're delighted to have her here. But I want to also mention something that I forgot, and that is really thanking our sponsors. I know that usually you do it in the beginning, not that, but we're really grateful for Rider-affiliated companies to being our gold sponsors, Ventura Community Foundation, Economic Development Collaborative, Limonera being our silver sponsors. We also like to thank our own DEIJ, for supporting this effort. We're grateful for their mini grant and then also increasing that, so allowed us to do this work without any financial constraints. Leanne Nelson, our provost, very supportive, so I'm really grateful on behalf of the team that we work together. I'm really grateful that we had all of this support. While I'm on that, I also like to do that because, I don't know, maybe I'm getting old, I forget things, so I better say it while I'm here. I really like to thank my wonderful colleagues who really helped us to put this together. And looking at that, you know, we really been very, very fortunate to have Rosie Baker, our communication coordinator. We had our Vinnie Torres, the research assistant, recently come on board. Kemi, we have, I don't see Hannah around, you know, also our administrative assistant from the School of Management. Let me see that if I miss anything, I will be killing myself later on. So I really appreciate the work that they really put a lot of effort into this, and I don't know how many hundreds of emails, other things have changed. I want to also let you know, all of you, that the program has been recorded, you know, non-stop, except that with some intervals when we were having lunch or breakfast, nice relaxing music for our those who are actually following this in our live stream. Their numbers go back and up and down, but they are following us also. And so the recording will be available. We will put it on the website so you can download it. If there is any difficulty, give us a little time to really do that. And then you can just send me or Rosie an email, and then we'll have that, you know, at no time, you know, sent to you or give you the direction to really have that. The report that you've seen, that we put some, just a kind of sample of that, because it is going to be developed more kind of professionally with thematic pictures, blurb up different things. So we would like to nice, easy on the eyes and follow easier. So that would be ready, tentative time, maybe 3 weeks from now. That would be also available to anybody who wants to upload, okay? So again, if you don't hear anything about it in 3 weeks, just send me an email, make sure that happens. We want the recording, we want the report, we want everything available to everybody, okay? No giving your name or email, just download it, you know, and that's fine, okay? So without that, I think I've done what I told myself that Jamshid, don't forget that. So I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Susanna Cruikshank. Currently directs the Civil Society Organization Center for International Cooperation and Public Management Studies. The abbreviation of the organization is CECIG, where she worked on projects that accompany the day labor population in the state of Morales and San Luis Potasio, if I make Potasio, thank you very much, as a part of the national network of day laborers, agricultural day laborers in a number of regions. Her work in the CECIG includes extensive research to produce comprehensive diagnoses and proposals on agricultural day labor living, working, and wage conditions. She directed campaign for Oxfam Great Britain in Mexico, Central America, Caribbean, and was director of the campaigns for Greenpeace Mexico. She has collaborated with different cooperation agencies as a consultant, such as German organization agency GIZ, Catholic Relief Services, and Ford Foundation, among others. Susanna is a member of the board of directors of the Peasant University of the South in Morales, Mexico, holding the position of academic director. She has been a consultant for the IDEA consular in 6 years, and she's been developing different plans, campaigns, evaluation design, results, and impact. She has published various essays, among which one a standout chapter of good practices in hydrocarbon projects in Mexico. Susanna is a sociologist specializing in the sociology of work, grounded from the Metropolitan Autonomous University. She has also a master's in international cooperation for development from Mora Institute. She was awarded a National Science and Technology Council scholarship with honors to complete her master work. I'm delighted to invite Susanna to the podium.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank Dr. Jamshid and Alvaro, and for you to stay here, and them for the invitation. My English is not the best. I'm a little bit nervous about it, but would you have patience with me, please? Well, as Dr. Jamshid says, CESI, it's called the civil organization where I work. I was founder, and we work now with a very nice team. CESI has, we try to organize in 2 lines of action, and one of them is the right for a decent work. And in this space of organization, we do work trying to accompany farm workers, the labor workers, you say. And that's what the experience that I would like to share with you. My master thesis was on migration, and since that time, a long time ago, like 23 years ago, I began to see how migration is really a big problem, more for, well, beginning to say that when I saw the title of this conference, I remembered that I wrote this small poem from Rosario Castellanos. I did not leave, I have not returned. I was always here living, is the Rosario Castellanos. And I loved the title of this conference because finally borders are just a political border. We are all the same, and because of the reasons that Alvaro said, sometimes many people have to migrate out of their own communities of origin. So when I began to work with them, and I saw that, as Maureen says, we are just privileged people, but we try to be we have solidarity with all those who don't have these privileges, that we do have. And that's why I'm really honored to be here, just sharing a little bit of the experience that my colleagues and me have working, trying to accompany these people that have to migrate out of this own community of origin. And thank you very much. I know that I have hearing you, and I was saying that this is really a very, very nice conference. All of you are people that knows a lot, are committed with your community, and it's really a privilege to be here with you sharing our experiences in Mexico. We work, as Dr. Jamshid said, in Morelos. We're working accompanying a small community of farm workers that they came to work there from Guerrero, and now they are, we call it asentados, that they are now living there, but they are still farm workers. We do work with some communities in Guerrero. Guerrero is a state that has a lot of migration, internal migration. And well, I'm going to share a little bit about this, and then how some of them that comes to the states of the north, because of the networks that we know that they are very, very important elements and factors when they decide to come to the States, when and how, being there in California, sometimes in Texas, they decide to cross the border with all these challenges that they have to face, Well, talking about a little of the problem and the context. I know that it was very controversial what Alvaro said, but I think that those are the roots. And we were saying even human mobility is an historical human phenomenon. The internal and international migration have become a relevant issue and a problem from several fields: economic, political, social, and cultural issues. And that was where we were saying, talking about this, if the main issue is an economic issue, if you go to some communities in Michoacán or in Zacatecas, for example, and you ask the people, children, what are you going to do when you're a big people, adult? They say, I'm going to migrate. No? They say their aunts, their uncles, their fathers, that when they are 15, they migrate immediately. So, and they said, and he comes with his big truck, and they build their big houses. So they want to be that. They want to do that. No? So yes, it is economic, but it's cultural too. And as somebody said before, for political issues too, and for violence more and more, Central America and much more states in Mexico, they are beginning to migrate because it is a very, very hard problem at the south. But we were saying too that climate change is beginning to be another factor for migration. No? Migration is conceived as a problem fundamentally for countries or states of destination. And we know that the states, United States and in Europe and all those countries that receive migrants have a very big problem, no? And so just governments cannot do everything. And that's why this is important to build networks. But I think, and it's important for me to underline this, that migration also represents many positive elements for humanity, and it is the cultural enrichment and the economic growth, and we know that that's true. No? Well, causes I'm not going to say anymore, but you know that at the south of the world, not just of America, the economic context and the violence is beginning to grow more and more. And, well, those are the main reasons, generally speaking. As I told you, I love the title, What Does It Take to Call a Place a Home? Networks, as I saw in your presentation, the presentations that precede me, networks are really important, you know. They that are woven between sending communities and migrant communities. This build the social capital that they call, and there are many analyses about this. But this social capital is building a woven among these two countries, the one that sends and the one that receives. And I am hearing here that Mixtecos and Zapotecos, they come from Guerrero, from Oaxaca. Now they have children here in the States and parents there, and then there is a complex woman, no, that is being tejiéndose, I said in Spanish. As I mentioned earlier, in many regions, migration is part of the culture, but still almost, I don't have exactly the percentage, but men still are who migrate more, but many women are migrating, and in families and with their kids and alone. And I know that Central America and some states of Mexico, many women are migrating, and they are now babysitters. They work for some restaurant, but I think that, well, what I know more, my experience is with day laborers, and this factor is too important. For me, this history of Ventura County, for me is new, and I'm really glad to hear your conference about where you work and give work to these people. And I think that this
migration, kind of migration, is beginning to grow too. We used to have a project with the United Farm Workers, and with them we knew about some very bad experiences. Some people who have the H-2A visa, some ranches keep them their documents and make them still without, they could go out. So we knew about this experience, and we could, the project was that we had a campaign saying the people in the community of origin, don't go to the States if they say they're going to pay for you this and they do not pay, or they have to pay for this visa, H-2A. They were deceived by these people, you know? And you know, in the way migration represents danger, pain, rapes, and in many cases death, but even that, people still migrate. And that is really, for me, when I imagine the people saying, I have to go outside my house. But I know that in the way, those things could happen to me. I could die, you know, I could be raped, and still I have to migrate, no? It's terrible, no, to think about this situation. And this is our experience, hearing from people and trying to help people in this way. Mainly we, as I said before, are focused on internal migration. And this is a photography of Guerrero, Tlapa Guerrero. In Tlapa is the mountain of Guerrero. Maybe you have heard about this place. This is a place where is the biggest migration, in the, Labor Days migration. They go to the states of the north, Sinaloa mainly, but Baja California también, and Ensenada. Some of them go to Sonora, or some of the states of the central states, Guanajuato, San Luis Potosí. And the reason that mainly is they do not have opportunities in their origin places. They don't have access to health. They do not have access to education. They do not have access to a decent work there. They have to look for where to go to have a decent work, to have some more money, no? Most of them speaks their own language, and that's another problem, big problem in Mexico still, because they do not speak Spanish. So if, with this element, they could be deceived is a word, engañados. They are being deceived almost all the time. The people from the ranch told them, you're gonna gain 400 pesos, that it means like $20 a day. But when they arrive, they just have like 100 pesos, no, 100 pesos, $10, no? So these are little elements that I could say, but when you are there and you can see all the conditions and where they live, women, men, kids, they are really terrible, and it is because they are being excluded from the system, no? As you know, rural poverty in Mexico is not a new issue, no? If Mexico is not a poor country, we are like the middle, no, of income. But if you go to the rural area, you can see a lot of poorness. Coneval, that is an institutional, is part of, no, it's not part of the government because it's autonomous institution that evaluates those programs from the government that are destined to eradicate or reduce poverty. Es Consejo Nacional de Evaluación de la Pobreza. They estimate that the extreme poverty was 10.8 million people.
And poverty, well, moderate poverty was 44.9 million people. ECLAC, that is I mean, you know what is ECLAC, it's for Latin America, estimates that poverty in Mexico amounted 58.1 million people in 2002. So poverty is an issue still, even we have a middle income, no? The states that have historically expelled agricultural day laborers migration are also these states that with highest poverty rates in Mexico, and maybe you know Chiapas, Guerrero, Oaxaca, and Veracruz. And we were talking with some of you saying, but these states are really beautiful states, and you can go there and you can see all the really nice places that they are. Even that, we have a lot of poverty there, no? And we could be a very rich country. Some central Mexican states are no longer just recipients, as I told you before. For example, in the case of Morelos, where now I live, Guanajuato and San Luis Potosí used to be states where just of destiny, no? Because they have mainly, for example, Morelos and San Luis, a lot of sugar cane, and they used to, with Veracruz, are the states that exports sugar. But now they are being states of origin of migration too. And Veracruz, for example, Veracruz and Oaxaca had this kind of migration that they go to the north states, but then they try to cross the border, you know, because always they have family, friends, and for it's easy to cross the border because they have these networks that we were saying about. Most of these families goes to these states of our exporting. Mexico, it's being part of these countries that are being like, I think that we must be like 12 or 13 country of exportation at international level of, for example, avocado that you recently had the bowl, no? And avocado, we are the first country that we exported, and we had a lot of products, primary products that we export. Jalisco, tomato, Jalisco and Sinaloa are the main states that export tomato, and well, Baja California with this wine, we're exporting grapes and wine. Well, however, many indigenous communities from the north of the states are also employed as agricultural day laborers. For example, Chihuahua and Sonora, they have a lot of indigenous communities, Raramuris and Yaquis, and it's really sad to see them go to Baja California to employ them, no, for looking for employment. Well, and when I was thinking about working in this, we remember a lot of histories that I have heard from these people that comes from Veracruz, crossing the border, or from Oaxaca. And they, well, many people, as I said, travel in families. And this is according to their ethnicity. It's different, no? For example, Veracruz, Oaxaca, Mixtecos in Oaxaca, in Veracruz son Nahuas, Totonacos. Los Mixtecos from Guerrero and from Oaxaca used to travel in families. And sometimes they have their trucks, no, and they go, everything inside, no, their sacks of corn, sodas, and all the family. And maybe if it fits, 2 families there, and they go. Sometimes, as you saw, there are these big trucks or these buses that the ranches send, and they sell there. So it's different in the different ethnicities that they come from, how they travel. Veracruz used to work alone. They used to work alone more and more young people is traveling, migrating. And what we see there is that drugs are being a very, very hard problem for them. People in the communities in Veracruz said that young people, when they come back, they are now addicted. And this is being a big, big problem in communities too. And it's not just when they go to the north, crossing the border, but just in Sinaloa, in Baja California, it's being a really, really hard problem. Well, I was trying to say here all the problems and the things that they face when they are traveling, beginning with the transportation, no? I think that if you can see this in each part of the way, all kind of problems, beginning with they are deceived when they go from the ranch and say, you're gonna win, and they then win less. Then in the transportation, as I told you, they go in trucks, and sometimes at the middle of the way, there are some we call retenes. And I don't know not the word in English. Retén is like some policías. Retail or see. They stop them and they say checkpoints, like yes, like checkpoints, and these are from policías locales, no, and local policies, and then they, hey, you cannot use this truck for with your family and all that you have there on the back, so you have to give me money, no? And they do not have money. They have the money that they're going to use for the 4 or 6 months that they're going to be out of their home, and they have to give the money to them. No, this is very, very hard problem too. And then if they are in these buses, big buses, if they have a way of 14 or 16 hours, and they do not have where to go to the bath, no, the condition of the buses are too bad. So this is the second problem, no? This fraud, deceive, it's not deceit, it's deceive. And all the mistreatment are part of the way, I want to say that, no? The other thing is that most of this migration from Central America and Mexico to the United States is undocumented. And the numbers that I saw, that this visa H-28 for agricultural work are few. Just in 2002, about 120,000 were issued just for Mexico, just in 1 year. But if you go to the National Migration Institute, the cifras, numbers, they said that around 1 million people migrate. So always the undocumented are, I thought that like 3 times, but no, there's a lot of undocumented against documented, no? And that's why when I saw this research that Dr. Jamish is doing, I think that it's going to be really useful and that we have these numbers, no? Well, we can see that there is everything bad, no? We can see some glimmers, destellos, glimmers of hope when we see people and when we hear some histories saying that they are now sending much more money to Mexico or to their countries in Central America, that their family are building some houses, that they want to go back when their houses are finished, or when they said, here I have food for my family, there I have not, no? And when we could eat this food that is from Oaxaca, no? This mole, and we said, well, really it's a cultural enrichment, but there is a big problem, and how we're going to resolve? I know that any of us has or have the answer, but want to give some elements. That's why I called elements for a proposal. If it is clear that economic systems should not focus exclusively on growth, the growth paradigm has been questioned in many areas, and I know that, for example, talking with Alvaro, we said, yes, maybe growth is being this paradigm that the system is following, no? But at the north, maybe it could apply, but I'm sure that most of the countries of the south need to grow in order to provide their population with a very quality of life, no? Social protection, decent jobs, better transportation, sustainable and green cities, and a dignified rural areas. It's not growth just for growth. It's growth distributed in an equal way, no? In an intelligent way. Global and national inequalities must be tackled. We know that. Redistribution alone is not enough. Wealth must be created differently and distributed globally. Prosperity and well-being must be within everyone's reach, and only then we'll be able to care for nature and the environment. Just when a people have all their needs satisfied, you can think about something else and try to make this your place better, no? In my view, we need growth, not blind and indeterminate growth, but people need a better quality of life. We think basic income could be the answer at national level, welfare state, or just order mobility. I think that maybe the three of them and much more, no? We were talking about local development could be, no? How you can change things at local level. Even that, we know that people always are going to be migrating. No? Mobility is part of the human essence, always in the search of a better life. Ordering it's not enough, neither, as the figures show. This Branko Milanovic, I was reading about him, and he says it's an economist, maybe you know him, and he said that maybe migration is one of the fastest, más rápido, fastest ways to generate equality. And when I read that, said, but at what price, no? Is the migration having debts and all those things that we see that it's a problem in the way for migrants. But we have this article of the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, no? The basic income is intended to provide an adequate standard of living for everyone in all the world. So we have tenemos que tratar, we have tried to do it's real, no? To realize it. Well, there are many economic things inside, like if the welfare state is has enough financial issues to be enough for everybody, no? What we propose at local level and in our work there in CESI is to involve local governments as a decisive element. I know in Mexico, local governments are really too weak. No, they do not have money, they do not have resources. But they have to be involved because they are in charge of the welfare of the people at that local level. They are the closer governments, creating employments, given decent opportunities. And what we do is make the people being stronger, empowerment, no? Just the participation of them in the construction of this social subject, that the construction of a citizenship that is able to demanding their rights for a better quality of life. If a day laborer, men or women, know their rights and they are able to demand them, and then there are more and more, and people of all of us are demanding this, their rights, the right to education, right to health, it's be part of the work that all of us have to do. The construction of this social subject, this migrant social subject, is one of the key elements, we think, to generate an important change in society, because migration must be an option, not a destination, And this last phrase, I think that is like the key of the issue. If you want to migrate because you want to learn more, to learn another language, to learn about everything you want to, it's good. But if you have to migrate because if your community of origin, there are no opportunities, these gangs are raping and you have to go out, or because something te obliga, forces you to go out, well, there is not a right, no, it's destination and it's not an opportunity. So, well, this is what I want to share with you, and I think that maybe you can share more of your experiences. I was saying to Dr. Jamish and to Alvaro that looking at you, hearing you, I really would like to strengthen these networks and know more about what is happening here in Ventura, that it looks like a successful experience, and we could share with you too in Mexico what we are doing and how could we do more. And thank you very much. That's
Thank you so much, Susanna. Susanna can answer any questions, any comments that you have. We have time for that, so please. And Vinny, you can help.
Hi, Susana. I'm Israel. I'm an indigenous person. Nyunsabi, Mixteco. So one of the things that I really highlighted or came to my mind while hearing your presentation was the number of indigenous community migrating, or now that we can call it their indigenous community being in diaspora, right? Because they're being forced from their homeland. So when we think about farm workers and migration, we based on your study, have you seen the increase of number of mainly being indigenous community in diaspora migrating, rather than in the past year it wasn't so much indigenous community, but now we've seen the migration pattern have changed over the years, and a lot of these indigenous communities are being forced off of the land, and they are coming to up north Mexico, but also in the U.S. And again, what you were saying, the linguistic, maybe I'm repeating myself from last time, but linguistic accessibility, linguistic for them to know their right. And once they come here, again, they face the same challenge of language availability. But I just wanted to hear from you, like, have you seen a big trend of the migration from Mexico, specifically being indigenous community, like from the region of the Mixteca, Zapoteca, and other indigenous community in Mexico?
No, the change that I have seen and that we have seen, because, well, we work with a team, is that they are migrating more. Well, in the pandemic, I think they stayed at home and it was really hard for them. But now they are migrating and more. And as you say, the same problem with their language is here and in the States. And this is a big luck in maybe working with them in an intercultural way. Maybe you could be part of this, talking with the people that speak your language.
Hi, Susana. Good afternoon. My name is Talia Barrera with the County of Ventura, the Farm Worker Resource Program. I'd like to introduce my team. Everyone is trilingual. They speak between Mixteco, Zapoteco, and Purepecha. And you were talking about what Ventura County is doing right. This is what we're doing right. We're building connections, we're building trust, and we have a great partnership with the Consulate of Mexico in Oxnard. So we've been recognized by the Mexican government as well for the great work that we're doing locally, and it's being transferred at the state level. And the government of Mexico has us really pinpointing this program very specific because we support our indigenous population. We connect with the farm workers directly in their own language, and we're grateful to organizations such as Ryder, MyGov, CRLA, ALRB, private sector, Broca, Nursery, Good Farms, etc. Our Farm Bureau, who've been instrumental in the creation of this program. Very successful. Now at the state level, the coastal area, Santa Barbara, Monterey, and Stanislaus are going to be creating the same model based on what Ventura County has. So I'm very grateful for everyone who's trilingual and they're part of the community, and we're making changes and recognized by the government as well.
Congratulations for your work.
I just want to piggyback on what she just said, because that was something I just wanted to share a little while ago when they were up there when I talked about education. As a matter of fact, as I said, I'm an educator. So the California Association of Bilingual Education, they brought into Oxnard, if I'm not mistaken, you did ask what can we do. So through the consulate through Mexico, they have plazas comunitarias. Oh. So this brings an opportunity for a lot of the population, immigrating here, to be able to finish up either their elementary or secondary school, and that is done in their primary language. And specifically, I know through Oxnard is one of the biggest plazas comunitarias that we have because they do offer it in the languages. And the dialects that they do speak. Yeah. That's a resource. That's an excellent resource that we do have available too.
Yes, you do. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this.
Hi, Maureen from the Farm Bureau, if you guys forgot me from before lunch. I really loved your presentation. There was actually like this poetry about it, right? It almost seemed religious, like my destiny, and I have to go through these trials and tribulations, and then I'll go to the promised land. And the promised land isn't what people think, right? It's not heaven here. It's a really hard life. And I wanted to hear, because some of the alternatives that you presented are very collectivist, and I wanted to hear if you had any thoughts about the ejido system and whether that was successful from your point of view in Mexico. A lot of the communities that are migrating here are come from subsistence farming backgrounds, so subsistencia, right? And so how do you consider that ejido system that Mexico is kind of famous for trying out? And what do you think about land use as a kind of indigenous rights type of, solution?
Thank you for your question. Yes, and I think that it's not an easy question because ejidos in Mexico, idealistically, they function very well, and they historically function like a community, no? They are part of a community. All of them take their decisions in a collective way, and they have their own government, these comisarios and all that. More and more, they have been, I don't know how to say, having problems or to function inside, no? I was saying to Alvaro that I heard about many these ejidos that they began to sell their land, and well, because they need money, no? And so part of their leaders sell the land, but all the rest of the people doesn't know that, and so even is a way that historically Mexico has as a community way to manage the land. Now it's not being easy to manage this, no? So I can say that in an idealistic way, it was, not now. I think that they are facing many problems as ejido to solve that. And just the second question was that I think that they as indigenous are still part of a community, and they have, and we respect that very much. many of them are first Mixtecos, Zapotecos than Mexican, no? And they are always want to be as part of this historically ethnical people, no? Some people said, some analytic or scholar says, now they are like the, es una palabra en español que no sé cómo traducirla al inglés, son los, lo que queda de esas grandes etnias, the rest. Sí, sí. They were very fantastic and great ethnicities, no? And now, with the system, they are becoming more and more excluded. And this is really very sad, because if they could, well, we have to learn how to live with an intercultural way that doesn't think that we that know Spanish, English, and we go to universities are better than them. No, we have to learn how to live that everybody has the same respect and delivers the same respect, they and us, and how to live in that way. I think that it's been hard, and we, the Occidentals, have made them before and make them excluded, and that's why are now impoverished, no? Poverty. Sorry for my English.
Hello, I'm Malcolm. I'm also from Mexico, and as we both know, like right now in Mexico, it's like the biggest political division it's been, I think, in a long time. And you know, like every 6 years, new government comes in and takes out all the stuff that the previous one done. So I wanted to know, what would you say, like, to, let's say, our people back home? What should we do to avoid, like, let's say a program like you propose, it's implemented. How do we make sure, like, the next administration doesn't, like, eliminate it? That's my question.
What can I say? No, it's because we have suffered that. Even with pre-PAN, Morena, it's the same, no? Because everybody that comes to the government wants to make the change, you know? They want to be the one who creates the world again, no? It's so hard, no? I know, and that's the thing that I know, that citizenship, civil society has to do the work and say, hey, we propose that, be part of this public policy, no? But even you have to begin each 3 years in the States and each 6 years at federal level. But they are going, they come and go, and who stay there is civil society. And I think that we have a very, very important key there, no? That demanding that public policies must be public policies, and they have to respond to all the needs that the people, no? See, but I don't know how to do more and more and more, and just beginning again and beginning again, and be part of that always, no? Constantly.
Thank you. I just want to, on the comment that Susana made about the ejidos, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware or understands about the ejido system, okay? Before the Mexican Revolution in the 19th century, well, most of the land was owned first by the church and then by huge landowners that owned thousands and thousands of acres. And then after the revolution, most of the land was distributed through the ejido system. The ejido system is like a cooperative where they can own, I think, up to 300 or 400 hectares, which is a lot more than acres. And that could provide a life to about 300 families, okay? And then the other system was the small owner, the propiedad privada, that they could own about 20 to 40 hectares. But with neoliberalism, with globalization, what she was talking about, ejidos began to be privatized. And that's the problem that has happened, that is happening with ejidos now. So it used to work very well, but it's not working as well now.
Thank you, Alvaro.
Just piggyback on what Alvaro said about the ejido. In the indigenous community, especially in the communal land, the lands, they're losing the land because of migration, right? You have to stay in your, there's a phrase made by Betty Cariño, an indigenous woman, they say, tenemos que irnos para quedarnos. Basically, I mean, we have to leave in order to stay. So if they're not able to farm the land, work the land, they lose it to the community. So a lot of those land are being lost because they can't stay. We can't say there's a historical mining and agriculture stuff that has been to the indigenous land. All those fertile land has been turned into like non-fertile. We can't farm. So like if you go into any place in the Oaxaca, Guerrero, the lands are rocky. The soil is not fertile. You can't produce the same thing as you could like 20 years ago. So they have to leave, even if they want to stay in those lands, because you can't produce. You can't live out of those land. You can't use your old traditional like knowledge to grow your corn, squash, anything. It's so a lot of, if you go into La Mixteca, you will see a lot of these beautiful buildings, beautiful houses, but empty. Lands that have been lost because they can't live there. They can't produce in order to sustain their life, even if they want to. Because again, we have a historical of like mining company, other transnational company that have come in La Mixteca, deforestation that affect them, and they're forced to. There's diaspora. We're basically in diaspora. And I think what Susana said, what can we do? So I think one thing is that we can do is acknowledge that these indigenous communities are here and they exist. So with even here in Ventura County, we have a lot of indigenous community, but at times we can't see them because they're classified as Hispanic, Latinos, and basically they don't exist. So we need to really acknowledge and find a way that we identify that they exist here in Ventura County, that they're here, because if we cannot do that, we can't provide them the service, right? Like, how do we know who are the Mixtecos, Zapoteco, Purepa, Chanahual, Mayan living here, when all of them are classified as Hispanic and Latino, and you can't provide the language and culturally service to them without really acknowledging that they're here. So I think that's one step that has a lot of the folks are here that we can start thinking about. How can we start making sure that these community, that we acknowledge that they have come here, and like how can we acknowledge their needs, and acknowledge that we're like, I always say like we're here, and I'm mistake, okay, right? I'm here like, but then I'm not here at the same time, because when they talk about like how many indigenous community you have here, we can't really come with the number, because again, we're not like being identified accurately or like the way that we're supposed to be identified.
Yeah, so.
Other comments?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Susanna.
you
I have a
for
little,
inviting me.
wonderful. I have a little token of, well, our appreciation goes a lot more than this bag, but this is just to remember Calderón. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you all. We just started this conversation. What I really liked myself about this gathering today, but we had a lot of time for Q&A, conversation. I think we need more conversation. I think that's the key to bring us together, help us to look at real issues, separate them from what we think are the issues. And I hope that we can continue with your help from everybody here to continue this conversation. I want to thank you all for coming here, sharing this experience with us, and we'll continue. Thank you so much. Thank you.